Welcome. I'm Larry Bennett, and I'm Program Chair, Fire Science and Emergency Management at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm also a proud member of the Greater Cincinnati Hazmat Unit. And as you notice out in the parking lot, we've got one of our mobile trailers, and during breaks, you're most welcome to go out on that trailer, and we're always looking for new members, all right? We should be prepared to respond to calls at any time, day or night. So we have a number of presenters here today, several chemical companies. Are going to be sharing their best practices and their relationship with the fire service. You know, and the takeaway I hope you get from today's seminar is that a fire department needs to have a continuing close relationship with chemical companies in their district. It's not simply the annual fire inspection. It's a continuing relationship. As the fire department is hiring new personnel, being invited to tour, it's a partnership relationship. Does that make sense? All right? It's simply not simply fire code enforcement. And so that's the message, and I hope that those who watch this seminar, which we're videotaping, you know, will follow that format. And if they don't have a partnership relationship with their chemical company, start one. Does that make sense? So Chris, come on up, all right, with your friend. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here at Chernobyl Fire. We were going to hold this at the Hazmat Unit, and we got so many RSVPs, we ran out of space, and the first place I called was here. So tell us about your department and who's this friend with you.
So welcome to the Chernobyl Fire Department. We are a 24/7 facility. We have a number of hazardous material places in our town, but we have some places that we respond to that when alarms come in, it's kind of elevated. Boy Chemical being one of them. Great company to work with. The fire department goes to companies, you find representatives before anything else happens. Where is the problem, and what is it, and what do we do once we find the problem? We can't remember all of the resources and all of the things that we need to know about chemicals, everything that everybody would have in the building. But companies do. They know exactly how to mitigate it. They give us a plan, and we execute the plan. We call in the proper resources after that, and then the problem goes away. Ideal. First, as far as the facility, restrooms on the other side of the wall. If you do the lines backed up, straight at the end of the hall is the other one. Just make sure that nobody parks in Johnstown parking lot. If you did, if you could assume if you did visit the parking lot over here or out front, you could run off into the business and maybe they're not.
Who's your friend?
This is my friend Sonic, my partner Sonic. He's a Excel executive K9 with the ATF.
I don't know if our audience can see it on camera, but is there some way you can put it on? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm out the back door fire runs and Charlotte. So she goes in after fires are put out and determines if there was a strong issue with the fire. She can smell things that we cannot see or smell at all. She can probably pretty good at her job. So the two next Tuesday, we've been working together since the beginning of November.
Can you describe a little bit of the training that who you had to go
So
through?
ATF selects those. She was actually a failure out of the Guy United Wide program. She likes to pull, she likes to steal stuff from people. These are trophies for her. She bites the cap off, shakes them around, and then walks away. So ATF finds them. They select them in their program. They train for 6 weeks on imprinting odors, what to do when they detect the odors. And then as a handler, I went to Virginia and trained for 6 weeks, set basically with her. Even on Thanksgiving Day, she was a food reward canine, which means she has to smell acceleration in order to eat. She does that 2 or 3 times every day. So if she doesn't eat on a bowl, every meal she eats is right on my hand.
Wow. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for allowing us to be here. Have a round of applause for the sponsor. And I'll share a little bit about how this seminar came to pass. Every Monday morning, with my dog, who's a 6-year-old, I go to Bethesda North Hospital Emergency Department. not for patients, but for the doctors and the nurses. And if you bring a patient up there, virtually every doctor and nurse has a picture of my dog on their badge. And it's very rewarding. Last Tuesday we were there, and the parking lot was jammed, the waiting room was jammed, and there were life squads bringing in patients, high stress environment, and they hugged my dog, which is wonderful. Well, one of the EMS coordinators is a former Sharonville firefighter. And I said, I'm looking for chemical companies that I can invite. He said, you got to contact the boy immediately. And I went over there on early morning to meet with your health and safety person. There wasn't a spot open in the parking lot, Andy. Not a one. And the trucks were lined up. I couldn't believe how busy it was. And so we reached out to the boy, and that's who our first speaker is. So Andy, could you come on up? And Kim, Kim's going to come up because Kim's husband works at the boy, but more importantly, she places students at the boy who are co-oping. And UC was the first university in the nation that started co-ops, and that's what they're famous for. And so, Kim, all right, and Andy, could you kind of share how co-op relationships work before we get into details of your company?
Sure, DuBois Chemicals, we have our headquarters here in Sharonville, and we have research and development labs and also a manufacturing plant. And for decades, we've been bringing in co-ops from the University of Cincinnati, mostly from the chemical engineering department, but we've had other co-ops and other programs as well. So over the decades, a lot of those folks have turned into chemists in our labs and folks that full-time employees in the company. We currently have actually 6 or 7 of these co-ops in these cities that are working with the
It was line number 5 on all chemical companies that you see listed. Number 5, most universities is with DuBois Chemicals. So we're really excited about the relationship. They call, and I give them resumes. It's important that we work together and work fast. But we even have students who graduated and gone into sales. Because think about it, if you're selling chemicals and you're a chemical engineer, that's a benefit to the company. How many people here are students today? Just raise your hand. So if you're interested in co-ops, whether that's the environmental today and chemical, could I have anybody else in the majors? But we have a full gamut of majors, so we can supply any students. And the difference with UC is the co-op program means they might come in the spring or the fall or the summer. They rotate. It's a required part of our program. You know, some schools, the students can come work for you in the summer, but you don't just have business in the summer. So we have a program that we have on.
And do they get credits? They get paid? How's that work?
So they get paid by the employer because they are a full-time employee and the IRS requires that. So whether they do work, they have to get paid. They get credit because they're required to do 5 co-ops as part of their engineering degree. So where the students graduate with a year and a half of experience and relationships with great companies that they could potentially start working for right away. So it really gives them a leg up on going to another school that doesn't have a co-op program. And who wants to just learn from the books? Right? I want to go into the environment and I want to do the stuff. I want to see what it's all about.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. So Andrew, you not only kind enough to agree to be our first presenter, but you've offered a tour with the students starting at 1 o'clock today. Give us a sense of what they're going to be seeing touring the company.
So the facility we have here in Sharonville was built in 1967, and it's our new manufacturing site. We produce about 120 million pounds a year of product. We make a lot of different specialty chemicals. So people who manufacture things and have industrial facilities, they use different chemicals to run their facilities and manufacture their products. So we supply literally thousands of different specialty chemical products to those customers. In this building that we run the tour, we currently have about 2,000 different raw materials. And so we have a lot of that in wrapping. You'll see the pallet wrapping. Just thousands of pallet spaces of wrapping in the building. We also have a bulk tank farm. We have silos for powdered raw material. So if the bunch of you tour, we'll walk through the big manufacturing facilities, you can see how they store materials. We'll walk through the manufacturing area. We'll go outside and look at the rail spurs and the truck bays and the ways we bring raw materials into the facility and ways we ship products. That's all.
Can you give us a sense of a product you make that we might interact in our lives?
Well, just because of COVID-19, we ended up manufacturing hand sanitizer. That's an oil-based hand sanitizer. That's definitely something that you would see. For most of our products, though, we're business to business. We're selling to manufacturers of parts, tractors, cars, tools, anybody who makes something out of steel or aluminum or even plastic. They use a lot of different chemicals to make their processes work correctly, make their machines work correctly. And so we provide a lot of those chemicals that can be used from end-to-end from any kind of manufacturer.
Got it. So in the fire service, you know, we're always hiring new personnel, folks are retiring. What happens if I get hired here at Sharonville Fire, all right? I'm on duty. How do I get exposed to your department in a non-emergency matter?
Well, we have annual communication with the fire department, where we're submitting the chemicals to the personnel facility, providing masks, films, where those chemicals exist. So the fire departments have that as a regular, part of the regulatory requirements every year for the season. We've had occasional interaction with the fire department, where we'll come in, ask them to come in, do like tabletop drills. We haven't done that in a while, particularly because of the COVID manufacturing. We have a lot of non-emergency interaction with the fire department that would be either an employee has a health issue, somebody gets sick, and the facility needs medical support. So the Sharonville Fire Department comes through to us every time they come and take care of folks that have some kind of health issue. We also have false alarms, fire alarm system, sprinkler systems, have these false alarms. And so we get to know the Sharonville Fire Department pretty well through some of these false alarms.
Got it, got it. And false alarms are, that's not somebody pulling a box.
No, it's, for example, in a sprinkler system, our facility is a sewer exposed sprinkler. And there are dozens of sensors in the sprinkler system that are designed to detect any kind of flood. If the water moves just a little bit, it'll set off the fire alarm. And so we have an alarm system that sets off the local alarm and also automatically notifies the fire department. So those are the kinds of issues that we run into. And so, for example, if there's a water main break somewhere in the city of Sharonville, there's some big construction project where there's going to be a lot of movement of water in the system. Things like that can cause a very sensitive alarm system.
Got it. Thank you. And again, thank you very much for not only being our opening presenter, if you will, but for going through our, for being such a great citizen. I'd like to open it up. The concept here today is Q&A, and if you do get a question, can you kind of repeat the question for our video? All right? Come on, help me out here. We've got a bunch of firefighters in the room and otherwise. Just got some questions.
We don't know where it's located.
You don't know where the plant is
Because
located?
he's not from
Yeah.
here.
So it's about 2 miles east on Temporary. So we're actually very close to it. So we have 3 entrances, so just go down Temporary 2 miles.
And on the right is the new Sharonville Police Department.
Yeah.
So you see the cops on the right, they're on the left.
Got it.
Quarter mile west of 42.
So, the morning I was there, all these truckers are all lined up. Is there a particular time where you're filling up trucks, or is that a 24/7?
Well, certainly in the morning, we have a lot of raw material deliveries coming in. So trucks that are coming long distances, they may have to go sleep at a truck stop, and they're eager to get up the next morning, to get unloaded, and get back on the road. So in the morning, you have kind of a surge of trucking. Definitely good.
Got it. And with your multiple entrances, you know, in fire service, about 75 to 80% of what fire service does now is EMS. So if it's a life squad call, how do they know what door to go to?
Well, Our practice is we have an emergency response team that has Walker training. I can explain what that means. That gives them some education on how to interact with emergency responders, like the fire department, and police department. So we always have a member of our emergency response team standing out on the street waiting to direct traffic. So if we have somebody who is having medical issues and we need to get the ambulance to the closest door, we'll have a member of our emergency response team out there waiting for the police department to make sure they know where to go. So that's the way we generally handle it. They typically come to the main entrance, they know where to go. But for a unique situation, we'll try to flag them down and make sure they get to the place fast.
Got it. Unfortunately, cardiac arrests happen. AEDs are a common item. Do you have any AEDs?
We have 5.
Wow.
We have a trained first aid team that we trained over 2 years on CPR and AED.
Automatic external defibrillators for those who are not in the business. AEDs that shock. So you have people who are trained on shocking if necessary.
Yeah, fortunately, we've never had to do that. The Sharonville Fire Department has been very responsive. We've never had a situation where we had to use an AED, but we just, over the past month, did the record training.
You know, and Christ Hospital began a outreach of putting AEDs in nonprofits. So I got an AED placed at our church. There's nobody in our church who watches the battery. So, you know, that's another obligation. It's fine to get the machine for free, but somebody needs to watch the battery.
We pay $100 a month for the
Any other questions? Yes.
There's 2,000 different chemicals that you have. How many of them?
The question is 2,000 chemicals, how many of those are hazardous?
It's hard for me to say off the top of my head how many are hazardous. From an OSHA standpoint, probably the majority would be considered hazardous. From a DOT standpoint, probably a much smaller number. But from an OSHA standpoint, the majority would be considered.
Yep. And Bob and DJ, we all serve on the LEPC, Local Emergency Planning Committee. Are there records that we could pull up on our hazmat team that would reflect what they've got on board?
They're a tier 2 reporting system, so that all the chemical profiles are with EMA and also can be shared in the field during an incident.
Got it. And is that, those tier 2 reports, is that something you complete on an annual basis?
By March 1st, we do a detailed inventory of all the chemicals present in all of our facilities, including one here in Sharonville, and provide those to the local emergency planning committee or fire department that include diagrams, so where and
Right. And that LEPC, all over the nation got formed after Bhopal, India. And that terrible, 100,000 citizens killed. And so now chemical companies, by federal law, must complete these forms. And so we have access to it, and that's important. All right, any other questions? All right, how about a round of applause? Huh? All right, Ron Paxton. Shepherd Chemical. Rob, you made the mistake of sitting next to me at an LEPC committee meeting. Remember that discussion?
I did.
Yeah, and I said, my God, you know, we want to reach out to chemical companies that have positive relationships with their fire department, all right? And you said, well, yeah, we have one in Norwood with the Norwood Fire. And Lieutenant from Norwood Fire, yeah, come on up for a minute, if you don't mind, all right? Yeah, come on. Right? So, could you kindly share what's your relationship, be nice now, with the Norwood Fire? And why is it in your business interest to have a partnership relationship?
Well, I think we have a very good relationship. When I was asked to participate in this, I was very willing, I'm sure. I need to ask the fire department for me. I knew they would, because the schedule allowed for it, et cetera. And of course they did. So one of the first things I want to do today is thank the local fire department for the lovely here. If he's taking time out of his day, and they're paying people overtime so he can be there. And that's the kind of relationship we have. I know I can count on them, they know they can count on us. I've got a number of examples I could speak to you about.
Sure, please.
So we do, well, this was one example recently. We had Norwood Fire Department help us with hydrogen flow testing on the property in Norwood. We can have a service do that. We'd like to ask the fire department to do it because they can come in, they get to familiarize themselves with the hydrants. We get to learn more about maintaining hydrants and that kind of stuff. But, you know, one of the greater values of doing that is you get to talk to people. While we're sitting there doing our thing, you're waiting for the people to get to another spot or whatever like that, we're just talking. We can talk about some of the hazards we have on our site. So recently there was an event in Texas with a chemical company where they lost a lot of acetic acid out of the tank, and people were killed by it. Acetic acid is concentrated vinegar. You use it in your household and dilute it. But acetic acid is fully concentrated. It's very dangerous. It has a flash point of about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It has an IDLH of just literally 50 ppm, which is pretty small. So it can burn. It's highly corrosive. We have a source saying acetic acid on the property. So while we're sitting here and we're talking, I'm sharing this information with the fire department. That's one way that we can communicate and we can familiarize each other with what we do. So the other thing we do is we try to have tours. We bring the fire department in, hopefully once a year. We're going to do this in October. Haven't done it since January of 2020 because of COVID. But we get an opportunity then to explain to them what kind of materials we have, where they're at, what to look for when they come in. They get to know the buildings. And, you know, I've noticed over the years, some of them test themselves like, oh yeah, in this building we've got something, and they wait for it. Like, yeah, we do, or we don't, or that's over here. So they start to learn it. And, I know the Norwood Fire Department has some newer people up today, but they haven't seen a plan to do it in October. One of the greatest things that we do that I like, and I really enjoy, is we do ASWAP refresher training every year. The University of Cincinnati State come in and they provide the training. But by the way, I want to say thank you to the University of Cincinnati and the proud graduates of the University of Cincinnati.
All right, what was your degree in?
Chemical engineering.
Oh, there you go. Did you co-op anywhere?
I did. It was with the oil refinery. At that time, it's called Ashton Oil.
Yeah, fantastic.
And we do hire
Lots
co-op students.
Where are they on your list?
in the top five.
Top 5, all right.
So various professions other than besides engineering. But anyway, we do ASWAP refresher training. And we do it on our site. And we do that usually in conjunction with a neighbor chemical company. So all of us get together. And rather than go through a lot of repetitive, okay, here's what a tank truck looks like, here's how factors are supposed to be, here's what some toxicity information and that kind of stuff. We get to discuss things in the context of what do we have on our site, what have we worked with, and where is this stuff. And again, it's because we're spending time together, we get to talk about it in an informal way and get it together. Become friends. Really. You know, I walk around the neighborhood sometimes at lunch and fire trucks will go by and we'll wait.
Eric, what's it from your perspective to have, a chemical company, it could be a high-risk event, you're called in, on a fire, and they release. What's it like to have a partnership relationship?
It's awesome. So like you guys already hit on, this is we good. It's not always so chemical release. People still get illness sick. People still have cardiac events. People are so bad at it. But we're still making all those runs. And the big thing that we kind of work through is the communication piece, right? So just because we're going to a chemical company doesn't mean it's like exposure. And that's what it's like we impose on you guys. Like when you guys call us, be specific on what we're going into. So whether that be a fire, it could be a truck in the parking lot, or it could be something on fire in the chemical or the facility. So just differentiating those and communicating that, and then having a familiar face is always nice, so we can kind of make those.
I'm afraid to do elsewhere. So yeah, so just to make those connections, like before a big incident, it's key.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's as simple as like, this is support role, they might call you like, hey, we had, this thing happened, why don't you come over and check it out? Sure, no problem, we'll go over there and like, yeah, no worries, or we can say, hey, this is kind of a big deal, and I get somebody else involved in it. I mean, we don't go there every day, and they have, just to say kind of how safe, it's kind of like natural gas, and that's the way I put it, because I have a small brain, so I keep things simple in my mind. It's like natural gas, right? When it's in the container and do what it's supposed to do, we're none the wiser, we're walking all over it, and then when it comes out of the container and does something bad, that's when we kind of, get nervous.
Got it.
Something with them.
Tell us about your pre-plan. You actually had a fire. Do you have a pre-plan as to what hydrant you're going to hit, or where you're going to place your apparatus?
We do, depending on, there again, communication, so if they say building, I'll just kind of make up a number, just because I don't want to talk about specific stuff, but, their company, but if I'm going to building, Z, I know that's in the back, southwest corner or whatever, the hydrant, 300 feet away, and we're probably gonna slow down anyway when we go in these places. It's kind of hard for us type A, action oriented, people would go in there and be like, hey, we have to slow down because we don't really necessarily know what we're going into. So, and they know that, we have a thing, line of sight, sign of life. I can probably justify going in my truck will probably do with an SCBA, if I see somebody in the doorway with their foot moving. But if I see somebody not moving in there, we're all gonna slow down and kind of take a step back. And, that's a big piece for us too, to kind of make those connections, because, if we go down, we just added a problem.
So if I can, because one of the relationship we have, we talk to each other, they know fires, we know chemicals. And, one of the examples I'll use is I've learned from doing hands-on training with them. You've got these ERG books, they're very high level, they're meant for, if you're gonna approach something that you don't know. The thing
It's a
is,
resource guide.
yeah, the thing is, we know what chemicals we have on site. And there's a variety of hazardous properties associated with them. They might be in this part of the plant, or that might be in that part of the plant. I know where they're at, our team knows where they're at. So they look for guidance from us. We talked, for the record, some of the things that we talked about is, so we have chemicals that, the unique thing about it is that they're an oxidizer and they're organic together. So that means they'll actually burn in the absence of oxygen, because they supply its own oxygen. So you can have a nitrogen blanket on it, it's gonna burn anyway. One of the first things I've learned that they ask when they come in, do you have anything water reactive? Is this a water reactive issue? We do have some things that are water reactive. We have a research and development laboratory. Most of the things are not. So right off the bat, we're talking to each other. What is it? What do we got? How do you approach it? My experiences have been, and we've been very fortunate that we have use for that, okay? But my experiences have been when something does happen, some form of chaos follows it. You've got to stand back and find out really what's going on. So in other instances, I strip at the chief. We and I have discussions about what's the best way to approach it. Circumstance, and there are a number of drums sitting on a pad. They're supposed to be charged to the truck for disposal, take off site. The truck driver had an incident. The truck driver had to take it off site to the hospital. The truck is still on. The engine's still operating. It's a hot day. It's like it's been lately. It's 90-some degrees. These flammable drums are sitting on the side, getting hot. What are we gonna do about that? Chief didn't want to turn the truck off because he was concerned that some kind of spark or ignition source would be developed. He and I talked about it. I really appreciate you turning that truck off. We did. And in that case, they went. There's other circumstances where our guys were going. And they came back and they came up with whatever they deal with the community. So it depends on the circumstances. It depends on what you're working with. But working together, and that's really the greatest thing that's the point I want to really make today. Because I know these guys, I've worked with Bennett here for a while. I can talk to him, I can be honest with him, he's honest with us. Rather than just come on site and say, what do you got? And try to figure it out. We're already sprint.
Yeah, if you have a major event, unfortunately, there's been a couple in Illinois, for example, earlier this year. One of the biggest problems is missing employees. because there was no gathering spot designated, you know? And Sally said, well, hell, the place is on fire, I'm going home. And now the firefighters are in looking for Sally, you know? And so having a designated gathering spot when people are evacuating the building could also be a key factor in a major event.
And as a board, we've got a funny story. We did the drill once with our R&D laboratory supposed to be on fire. These guys had to come. Happened to be in October, and it was actually cold. I mean, it was like 30 degrees outside. So we go to our muster point, which is cold. And what I didn't realize is it's cold. I didn't have a coat. So one of the things I've learned is be prepared. I mean, in the wintertime, be prepared.
And we do collaborate as well, just to kind of build on what everybody's been saying. Like, we've used LEPC to do some cleaning diagrams for us. Like, say, hey, give us your top, 10 worst case scenarios, and they provide it, we can install them, and so they'll provide that to them, and they'll do some cleaning models for us, and like, that's all stuff that we kind of work on together as well. We work, like you said, there's another, he shares property lines with another big chemical company, so like, as a 30,000-foot view, that could be a very, big event for us. They both are pretty good sized chemical companies, and they'll have different compounds. So we work with the two chemical companies as ourselves, Cincinnati State, their trucker cadre, look at DC Hazmat, they bring their truck down. We rotate to Cincinnati, they bring their truck down. So we do like just not just collective.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Lieutenant, is there any specific hazards or just kind of things that are different from a normal call that any manufacturing environment, be it chemical or not, you face when you go in?
So there is, and that's key, is just identifying those things, depending on what building it's in, especially for them and us, right? So if they say it's building Z, we know building Z has a corrosive, or what, and I'm making that up, so they don't really have building corrosive in building Z. So anyway, so just knowing those things, right, going into it is key for us, absolutely.
That's a great question. And then you in turn can decide whether to call in mutual aid or not.
Correct. We need more resources, and we see how to
All right. Any other questions? How about a round of applause? Come on up. And Steve, come on up if you would. Thank you. So putting together the seminar, I called Steve Kelly and I said, Steve, I've known him for 30 years. And I said, Steve, you're out there in beautiful Miami Township, out there in the sticks, and I'm sure you don't have any chemical companies or anybody you deal with. Oh yeah, but I do. They're that. And you've dealt with them down at your department in your prior at Westchester Township, right? So, yeah, and found you. I know. So, yeah, so could you all dialogue about, let me start with you, Steve. From a fire chief's perspective, having a chemical company in your fire district is both an opportunity for partnership and a challenge.
Yes.
How do you handle the challenge?
I think Lieutenant Blunt said well, forming that partnership, because a lot of what that is just, pre-planning things and talking to them and having that relationship ahead of time. So the air gas facility in our department, in our jurisdiction, has a very large hydrogen plant built into it as well, which, for those of you who know what hydrogen does, it can go boom real quick. Right? You can make a giant crater in the northern end of Miami Township is moving. So at the end of the day, when they were building that and going to put that into the facility, they already had a freestanding facility where they did a lot of operations with the containers that we interact with a lot in emergency medical services. Filling of oxygen, acetylene, different things that they're moving through that facility on a regular basis. We had a great relationship with them ahead of time. And had our crews go on walkthroughs there every year as part of their safety audit. We go in and we meet with them and talk to their management and safety staff. And then we do walkthroughs with our crews at the facility so that any of the responders know where it is, what they're capable of doing, their response and safety protocols as well. And then they can ask us questions, we can ask them questions, just like you guys did. Having that relationship and that open communication. And then when this hydrogen plant was being built into the facility, there was an opportunity to have a lot of discussion about fire code components and things that you don't normally think of, because a lot of the companies that do chemical stuff around
have been in place for a long time, and may or may not have additional opportunities for growth or construction. So when they do, it's a great chance for us to get in here and talk a little bit more about what this new operation is, what it means to them, what it means to us from a response component as well. But having that relationship ahead of time just paves that way.
That is so cool. How's that for intro, Carol?
Wonderful.
Yeah, so you're kind enough to brought some PowerPoint, to share a little bit about your background and what you do with the company.
Yeah, sure. So I work for Arcadis, which is an environmental consulting and design company. We do environmental incident response and recovery work. So oftentimes we're hired by the responsible party, like oil and gas, chemical companies. I do a lot of work for the railroad. So today I'm here kind of to talk about how that initial response, the emergency phase, can marry up with when we come in maybe towards steps into an incident and kind of take over and bring the incident all the way to the restoration.
Yeah, and the reason I reached out to their company is that we were at a LEPC supplied free training at Blue Ash at their new tower. And I didn't know they had a training room right there at the base of that tower. And I'm sitting next to, all right, someone from your company, and said, what do you guys do? Oh, we respond when it's a big damn thing. Pardon me. And I said, can you share? So I wanted Steve to kind of set the pattern of his outreach. Tell us when you come in, what's your relationship with a fire chief at that scene?
So when we get to the site, we're going to look for incident command, unified command, to start gathering some information about what all has gone down prior to our arrival. What kind of hazmat was released, who's involved, impacts to nearby sensitive receptors, that type of a thing. And to start kind of that dialogue. Another thing that we're really interested in is information about maybe phone use and firefighting operations with the emerging contaminant PFAS. There can be significant environmental implications that may kind of extend the lifetime of an incident due to the application of that phone. Obviously, we understand why it's needed in some cases. So we're also looking for volumes of water used in firefighting operations, and if there was something that was on fire, information about how long it burns, and if there's any documentation like photo or video of the smoke fumes, we can use that in mass balance evaluations as well.
Okay.
Some of that's in our
Yeah, so go ahead, and we have two representatives from Airgas here. I just wanted to warm up the room for you guys, all right? Because of this positive relationship, all right? And you can give Steve a hug later, all right? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, cool. So, again, my name is Carolyn Grogan. I work for Arcadis. Here today to talk about environmental incident response and recovery.
And you're based in Columbus?
Yes, correct. I'm out of the Columbus, Ohio office, so I've been working out of my house for about 6 years in Hopkins County. So a quick overview of the content that I think we're covering here today. Just an introduction on a little bit of my background and how I got into this position, and objectives for what I would like to achieve with this presentation. And then just a short bit on Arcadis and our incident response and recovery program, which is referred to as IRR. And then the main meat of the presentation is really our best practices for our response to help y'all understand what we do when we get these come down. Okay, and then number 4 there, incident mapping. We'll just touch briefly on some of the best practices we use for mapping incidents. These can be a big deal for our clients when it comes back around for maybe some kind of investigation or regulatory communications. And then at the end, just a quick summary, and we can take any questions or comments. All right, so here I am with the Columbus, Ohio office for Arcadis. My background is in geology, so I'm kind of just a confused geologist out here in the world of emergency management, really. Got about 18 years in consulting. My everyday gig is as a project manager. So that's for environmental site assessment and remediation projects. So typically like mid to large scale, groundwater contamination flows. Oftentimes it'll be chlorin-related products or chlorin-related solvents.
So somebody's about to buy property in a location, they won't buy it until you clean it up. Is that the issue?
Yep, that's right. So we're looking to assess the site and then develop remedial solutions that are cost effective for our clients and efficient, and then implementing those remedial solutions. So there's a wide array of different remedial tactics that could be applied. We'll get into a couple of more basic ones in this presentation. Another part of my responsibilities for Arcata is I'm the region lead for our response program. It's in the Midwest East region, which covers Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, and Western Pennsylvania. So I organize resources and recruit people to our program. At Arcata, our response team is voluntary. Nobody hires on with Arcata with a full-time job of doing response work. We want it to be voluntary because we want our staff to want to do the work. As you guys know, it's tough. You're up all night sometimes, away from families. So it's totally voluntary. And I make sure the staff are trained up. I heard mentioned earlier of the 40-hour OSHA HAZLOT training. We have that for all of our staff. We have railroad-specific training, client-specific training as well. In the last couple of years, I've joined up with our planning section incident management team. So we do have like ICS related support services as well. Typically, I'm sitting in the situation unit for that group. And then as I indicated, I do most of my response work for the railroad. And I drew a picture here. This is an aerial photograph from U.S. Coast Guard for the 2015 Mount Pleasant, West Virginia. This is a unit train of crude oil, 26 cars, millions of gallons of crude oil. And this was the first big derailment that I was pulled into and really sparked my interest in response work.
Introduction by fire, so to speak.
Yeah, just being able to work with such amazing teams and then the resources that are available and come together for a response really triggered my interest and what got me into this program. So up top there, the objective here today, I just want to give you an overview of the environmental activities that kind of come into play after a lot of you guys have stabilized the situation so we can get closer to the incident. Not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. If you want more information on Arcata, I'd be happy to provide it to you. We basically have 4 business lines. All of these business lines, infrastructure, water, buildings, and environment, which is what I said, come into play in response work. I think just the important thing to know is that we're for the responsible party. We provide technical and scientific support and solutions to help our clients achieve a successful and efficient response. Here is just a graphic that shows our response team in North America. We have a fantastic leader named Andy McManus. He spent a lot of time out at that Mount Pleasant derailment. He sits in Tampa, Florida, and he's just divided up the country into regions. So you can see my region there is in the magenta. We all work closely together to share about responses we've covered in the last month, lessons learned, training opportunities, and so forth. About 200 of these employees participate in our response team, and that's environmental engineers, geologists, chemists, chemical engineers, waste management specialists, the list goes on.
Do you use any co-ops from universities?
We do internships.
Internships?
Yep.
All right.
All right, so getting on to, this is just kind of an overview of what we do when we first come out to an incident. I imagine there could be some overlap here with some of the things that you guys do. But we always start out with a safety briefing when we get on site. Thinking through the tasks, recognizing hazards, assessing risk, controlling the hazards, and always keeping health and safety first. The PPE that we utilize is pales in comparison to what the first responders utilize, but we are equipped with full-face air purifying respirators, high-vet, FR gear, and then our standard PPE is just level 3, so hard hat, safety glasses, vests, and steel-toe boots. But it's important to stand out and make sure our PPE you believe is appropriate for the tasks that we're taking on. Up here, I've just kind of put the initial priorities to stop, contain, and recover the release. This is just an important mantra that we repeat to our response team. This helps focus the work when we're in the field. Documentation is a huge part of what we do. Oftentimes we're kind of made fun of for being out there and all we're doing is scribbling down in our little notebooks, but honestly it is a big part of why we come out to a site.
Who typically winds up paying for your service? Who's on the hook?
The responsible party. So we're hired by a railroad client, railroad.
Got it.
Also important to document the negative. So as an example, you have a 6,000 gallon diesel release in a rail yard and there's a nearby stream. So just walking up to the stream, documenting, I don't see any red diesel fuel floating on top and I see little minnows floating around. Documenting no obvious observed impacts is almost as important as documenting where you do have impacts. And then the last bullet there is just some information that we're going to request initially in the case of a derailment, getting information about the train consist. It can be hard to get information on the consist because the conductor can't legally hand it over, but that consist contains information about what was on the train. SBSs preferably from the supplier so that the SBS you're looking at is actually accurate to the commodity that you're dealing with. And then also just starting to gather materials like facility maps, utility drawings, and working with GIS to start mapping out sensitive receptors in the area. Alright, so we kind of already talked about it when we first get there. We're going to reach out and try and find command codes, speak with unified command, incident command, in order to obtain information about what's gone down prior to our arrival. Some important information here: concentration, volume, and brand of AFFF going that was utilized, and then volume of water for firefighting operations, and then the duration and intensity of fires. We'll talk about mass balance a little bit more here in a second. Considering downstream or worst case scenarios. So I worked on a train wreck about a year ago, significant ethanol release associated with the incident. And the derailment occurred during flooding conditions. There was an adjacent stream. The ethanol released to the stream and then migrated during flood conditions. About maybe 2 miles downstream, there was a pond that under normal conditions wasn't hydraulically connected to the stream. However, during the floodwaters breached the bank and went into this nearby pond. And then the floodwaters receded, and ethanol was trapped within the pond when the waters went down. So we were out of this incident for about 10 days doing cleanup work on the main part of the site when a resident called and notified that there was dead fish in a pond down in their house. So this is just a reminder. It's like super easy for us to focus on like the big, stain on the earth of the incident site, if you will. But also important to look around at the surrounding area. So we had been 10 days in, every day the incident's scaling down, get this phone call, and we're there for another month, addressing the big picture. The second to last point there, just monitoring. It kind of plays into what I just talked about and also the documenting evidence. Surface water monitoring, air monitoring for the workers and the community, that kind of a thing. And then evaluating next steps. Oftentimes for us, that's site assessment and remediation. We do have a handle on the extent of the impacts, and then once we do have a handle, what's going to be the best way to address impacts?
For emergency responders who happen to be at the scene, think about ground zero. If they're at the scene for a long time, is there any medical follow-up and physicals provided to the emergency responders that the railroad has to pay for?
So we're just in a regular medical monitoring program. So for our response team, as long as it's been a particular exposure, then we just have a once a year occupational health.
Right. But the firefighters who are at that scene, who have been there, you guys don't come in and do a medical exam for them.
No.
Right. Okay.
So, a few basic containment and recovery strategies here. Just full disclosure, Arcadis, we're not gonna be the ones that are necessarily putting boom out or constructing dams like this. Our response partners, environmental contractors in this area, HEPACO, I think is actively involved in the LDC here. Brian Martin is an expert at boom deployment strategies. But just a quick overview of some of the heating innovations frequently see in a response. Upper left there is the hard boom, often called river boom, creek boom. It's really used for containment and can facilitate recovery, but the boom itself isn't going to recover any product. Then bottom left, absorbent boom, just like it says, can be able to absorb petroleum products, less so for containment. Also referred to as soft boom or sausage boom. And then we've got two dam structures that are shown on the right side of the slide there, used for containment in surface water like streams or rivers. So the top one there is used for LNAP wood, light non-aqueous phase liquid like diesel, gasoline, and crude oil. And then the bottom is for DNAP wood, dense non-aqueous phase liquid like creosote or chlorinated solvents. So often these are constructed with sandbags, PVC pipe, crude construction and material usage that can be used to allow water within the stream or river to pass through while containing the product and then facilitating recovery from there. Some additional recovery strategies. There's, like I mentioned before, we have a huge array of experts on remediation. These are some more basic recovery techniques that are often implemented during incident response work. Drum skimmer, just a skim and pre-phase oil from surface water. And then when I was talking about the ethanol released to the pond, we aerated that pond. So this basically pumps to introduce oxygen to bring that dissolved oxygen concentration up. And then bottom left there is an interceptor trench. We use this a lot for kind of smaller diesel releases. This one was probably like an 1,800-gallon diesel release at a yard. You basically install a trench that's perpendicular to the down gradient flow path, and then backfill the trench with a permeable material. In this case, it is just ballast. And then you're installing corrugated pipe that runs horizontal, and there's some sumps that come up from it that you can use to basically monitor to see if that diesel is continuing to bleed out from the incident location, and then you can bring your back up and recover it. And the last one there, good old dig and haul. Just a great way to get rid of gross impacts at an incident site. So, evaluating mass balance is super important for a lot of our clients. So if a client has a release, especially if it affects a water body, there's going to be a regulatory fine associated with that release, and oftentimes it's associated with the release volume. So firefighters, first responders, they're going to have information that comes with this evaluation that we won't have until we facilitate some good communication about it. So we've got mass that's transferred out into the environment. Some of it's burned, some of it we recover via some of the technologies that I just mentioned, and then some of it's unrecovered. So in the case of a trade derailment, you might know that you've had a loss of 30,000 gallons of crude oil from a tank car. And then from there, you can do some calculations to evaluate how much went up in the fire. We have scientists who can look at video, take the size of the smoke plumes, the duration of the fire, and evaluate how much crude oil went up in that. This is a flame to not burn. And then, we look at recovery on absorbent materials, free products that's stored in frac tanks and vacuum operations. And we can also collect samples from contact water or soil to evaluate how much of the mass is in those media and kind of come up with a delta on what's still in the environment and maybe what it has impacted surface water.
I want to open it up for Q&A.
Okay.
Okay. And BJ, can I ask you to come on up for a minute? I know you're on the podium later, but this is raising all kinds of issues on incident command, and who owns the scene, you know? Sharonville Fire is called to a scene. They've got an incident commander. They've set up and they've called Greater Cincinnati Hazmat, right? And ultimately, we're gonna call in a company such as that. How does incident command work real world?
Well, in the state of Ohio,
And it comes
we
forward.
got, this is something like East County back there.
Yep, yep,
And we got Rick from FBI.
yep.
State of Ohio, this is starting the fire department. And it stays with the fire department. And those resources are pooled and work underneath the fire department, and the unified command structure will be set up at that point. So, police and fire work together. In this particular case, if we had something of this magnitude, EMA would be involved. So you get this, not so much a straight line, but you start developing, hierarchy of needs, as I would call it. And, the hazmat actually works in fire chief, and the fire chief collecting information. After that part of this is stabilized, then the recovery process, which is basically what these folks are talking about, they still will be working under the fire chief, remedy. He's in charge, basically, of the health and safety of the community. So that's where it's at. From a law enforcement standpoint, if there's an environmental crime associated with that, then you bring in the environmental crime unit, they're working with the unified community. So the big thing is that the fire chief has a large role in the whole incident, as well as the police department, and then the other agencies within the county and the state. You've got EPA involved, US EPA, with the railroads, they have a whole list of things within themselves. It's all water, the river, now we're talking with the Coast Guard. So all these agencies come together and work under the unified command situation.
Oh, and Carolyn, is that how it's worked out for you? You've been called to some of these railroad incidents?
Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes for the railroad, we're working for the railroad incident commander, representing that portion of unified command. Almost always, fire chief at the fire department, unified command, county EMA is often also part of that as well. So we're kind of communicating via the railroad, who's then working with unified command.
And I'm curious, do the railroads have like a material data sheet for each of the vehicles in that long train?
On a train that's outside of the yard,
Yep.
it's gonna be documented on the train concepts. So there's an engineer and a conductor that are in the locomotive of the train. The conductor is responsible for the load behind the locomotive, and the engineer is responsible for operating the locomotive. So as a first responder, we want to get with the conductor, who's legally not able to hand over his conscience to you. You could go up and take a photo of it, and that would clearly indicate what hazmat is on the train and what, paint cars associated with hazmat.
So by Pole Ground Football Stadium, that railroad track, there's been a couple of incidents in the last year with cars dangling over the edge. So if Cincinnati Fire responds to that and says, I want to know what's in that particular car hanging over the edge. Can they call somebody?
Yeah, so, CSX has a big operation in the Cincinnati Community Yard. There's the PSCC number, which is the first call to make in that case. There's also a tool called, Ask Rail, it's an app, where you can plug in the, car number and the train information on the cars. In order to get access to that app, you need to be in contact with CSX's or another railroad hazmat team. And I'm glad you mentioned this because there's a bunch of opportunities to participate in the railroad safety trainings. CSX actually just revamped their training. Norfolk Southern has fantastic safety training, and there's port lines in the area that are constantly running safety trainings as well, where you can learn about this information and car construction.
Yeah, in fact, we've just been invited to one that's going to be in Dayton. And last year we held one down in the Cincinnati train yard. It was very informative. I'd like to open up for Q&A. I will post all of those PowerPoints, all right, on the web so that everybody can see that. But I wanted to engage the room, all right? So, anybody have any questions about Do you have a response? Yes, ma'am.
Do you guys follow the continuously after an incident to like monitor the last of
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, so she asked about if we follow up kind of consistently after the incident to understand if impacts have been addressed. And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. So, that's part of the site assessment end of things, and oftentimes the projects will transition from hazmat response to more standard remediation response at some point. So we can utilize like surface water monitoring, or maybe we install monitoring wells to understand what, if any, impacts to the groundwater. And then that reporting we do on behalf of our clients, and it goes to whoever the lead regulatory agency is, depending on the incident. So in Ohio, they might, and probably would be the Ohio EPA, but it could also be US EPA, depending on the scale of the incident. Good question.
You mentioned medical monitoring and bringing physicians in for evaluation. How does Arcturus work with medical professionals? Do you contract? Do you hire physicians?
Okay, so the question was about medical monitoring and if we contract physicians. And so we don't do medical monitoring, to be clear. We can offer air monitoring services to verify the atmosphere is acceptable for workers in the community. Ms. Bennett here brought up medical monitoring for firefighters, and we do not offer that service.
So would stuff like, for instance, when there's a massive accident like this, and there's evaluation needed medically for whoever's involved, you're not very involved with that process, or you just try to figure out who comes in for the actual evaluation of the body frames and those that are involved in that.
And just so you know, we have a student here from the UC College of Medicine asking these questions.
Yeah, so honestly, I feel like the first responders in the room might be better to answer that than us. We would only get involved in the medical standpoint for our team if there was an incident, and then we would work through our work care program in order to evaluate that further. Sorry, get me more help on that.
Great question, Jeff. Great question.
Yes.
You know, and we learned from ground zero. You know, sadly, what's in that environment. You know, you're not wearing your SCBA, it's a hot day, you're just standing around, you know, the plume comes your way, you're sucking in, and you're wondering, you know, what's gonna happen to you? Yes, ma'am.
So if the locomotive is compromised, how else do you do it?
Repeat that question.
She asked if the locomotive is compromised, how else would you get responses? And so that would be, typically the notification to the railroad would be to the public safety department, and they would have that information and be able to provide it to the first responders.
Your experience with dealing with private landowners, I mean, for the most part, I'm sure they don't want you on the property, but when you're talking oil, it's probably pretty hard to keep them content at all. So how is that done?
Yeah, so he asked about communications with private landowners, which does come up all the time. It's a great question, and there's a whole gamut of kind of responses that private owners have. You know, I was actually just out at a train wreck in Panhandle in Florida, where it occurred near a sawmill operation, and the response work and wrecking operations were interfering with traffic to get trucks in and out, you know, so that the business could operate. So that landowner is not happy. And we do everything we can, traffic management plans in order to keep them happy. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you can have property owners maybe working in a farmer's field, you know, out in the middle of Indiana. And this really doesn't have to keep us back in that farmer being interested in the operations and learning more about it and being super easy to work with. But our clients, their PR groups, you know, public communications would be the one typically to source of those communications and negotiations on actually leasing the property during the operation. Does that answer it?
Yep.
Early in my career, Montgomery Volunteer Fire Company doesn't exist anymore, but it's now the city of Montgomery Fire Company. Yeah, and we get, yeah, and we get called by a landowner for the smell of gasoline. A mile away is a gas station. and the underground tank is leaking a mile away. Yeah. Imagine? Yes, sir.
To address the medical monitoring question, okay? Where it goes, it's coordination with the incident commander and the county EMA to determine whether public health assessments or some type of medical monitoring or emergency status will be needed. Contact the Ohio Department of Health, coordinate with the county and or city health department, and then request additional access if monitoring is required. The room fall to the domain of the contractor.
Wow. Pretty serious stuff. All right. Have a round of applause. Again, the rest of our Al, you're on. All right. Al, there's somebody in the room who dropped a dime on you.
I'm not sure how I got it.
But, yeah.
The best issue.
Uh-huh. But I don't want to name it because I don't want to. But guess what? When you have a good reputation in the fire service, your name gets dropped. There we go. And there's a clicker if you want to use it just to the left of the vehicle. All right. Good boy, my dog.
So I'm gonna probably change direction a little bit here. I'm gonna talk a little bit about, some of the challenges we face in the creative with new life solutions here. Introduction myself, I'm Al Cali, I'm a regional health and safety manager with New Life Solutions. I'm based in Cincinnati, Ohio. I cover 16 different plants throughout the Midwest region, in my area, and then 3 of those plants here in the Cincinnati area. We have one located in Westchester, one in Hamilton, and one in Triple Area, that's called down there, off of Evendale by UP. So we do have 3 facilities in the immediate area, with all of the fire departments for one purpose. Okay, so Univar is a fairly large company. Univar USA, or the USA portion. You can see we're number 1 in the USA as far as dental distribution. We're number 2, I believe, overall in the world. Overall, we have over 10,000 employees in our company. 8,000 of those in the U.S. We have more than 650 distribution facilities throughout the world, as well as about 130 delivering to more than 130 countries, and we have more than 3,500 tractors and trailer combinations. So it's a fairly big operation from that respect, and we do handle just about every chemical you can imagine. Kind of repeat some of this. We do a lot of shipping in rail cars. We have over 1,300 rail cars, and that's over 90 million gallons of bulk storage capacity. So overall, we deliver about half of the product. Clearly, is delivering the other half of the product. Just wanted to show this slide from a safety standpoint, and I'll kind of tie in why I'm spending a little bit of time with safety here to how does this affect spills and response in a minute. But one of our values is we're serious about safety, and we have a number of things that I'll show in a minute that talks about some of our safety efforts. Again, in the United States, about 130 sites currently. One of the challenges we face is these sites vary a lot in size, capacity, and number of personnel. Some are only warehouses, some do repackaging and blending, some are what we consider hub locations. In other words, they're hub and spoke distribution type operations. We have 4 sites that receive rolling rail cars, and this is where you'll see most of our actual response is focused at, is that aspect of the business. And the aging facilities vary a lot. We have some facilities that were built in the 1920s and some that were built just a few years ago.
In personnel, gas number, the site vary in number of personnel as well as the experience of the personnel. Products handled, just about every industrial chemical you can think of, that includes all the organics, all the solvents, some of the organics, oxidizers, and again, what we react to monomers, not the real bad ones, but some of the lighter monomers, as I would call it. So this is a picture of our LA facility, the building. The building on the right where the LA actually is, that's about a 250,000 square foot warehousing and packaging area. That's our largest location in the United States and one of our newest. The bottom right corner of that building, you see a bunch of tanks from an overhead view. Those are all solvent tanks. And the tanks on the rest of the facility are basically inorganic. We also have a rail car receiving. The rail car tracks come up on the upper side of that, swing around down to past the end there. So they receive a fair number of products on the rail car as well. Those solvents, hydrogen peroxide 70%, which are cut down to 50 and less, which is on site. So you can see this gets to be a pretty complex site. This is our site in Cincinnati, Ohio. The main warehouse there is approximately 110,000 square foot. We do a lot of cold blending there. We have a couple other buildings around the facility. The building on the right where Cincinnati is our chlorine operations. We manufacture bleach from chlorine gas or in hydrogen liquefied chlorine. So we can see chlorine rail cars there. And then convert that over to sodium hydrochloride. We use the packaged chlorine when it comes to facilities. We use it in the water plant. We no longer do that at this site. We only have one site doing that currently for us. This is a facility in Providence, Rhode Island, similar to the Cincinnati site in the fact that they bring in chlorine rail cars and make bleach from that chlorine. But they do have a marine terminal on site as well for receiving marketing sodium peroxide. This is one of our other sites in the Cincinnati area. It's in Hamilton, Ohio. The upper left corner, kind of hard to tell, those are tanks, but those are all flammable storage tanks, approximately 30,000 gallons each.
Now, if I get a 911 call to this facility, it sounds like a buffer factory to me.
You might want to ask the fire people that. I'm with you on that. If I wasn't ready there, I probably wouldn't get there.
See you later.
So we'll stay out just about a mile down the road.
You tell us how much weight.
I'm working from home. This is a facility up in northern Ohio. Those are all solid tanks. Again, a small warehouse actually operation. The warehouse is only like 30,000 square feet. But the 2 truck loading bays are not really solid. They also have their own access. Most of these facilities. And then we go down to something small. Anybody know where altitude is? Okay, yeah. I never knew that, but I got to say. This is a relatively small operation. The warehouse is only like 15,000 square feet. Interesting thing is the little picture, the building at the bottom of the right of the photo is actually the local fire department. And there's little sheds to the right. This site actually stores chlorine in containers, like it's not in one picture. They don't package it, they don't get it in real time, but they do store it. There's one or 2 other sites besides the packaging site that handles
I hope that fire department has a real good air handling.
So you can see from the variety of type of facilities we have, the number of personnel, it's a real challenge, but how do you respond to this, right? So one of the things we like to think is we really focus a lot on prevention in the first place, so you don't have to respond. And we talk a little bit about safety here, some of the steps we do from the safety to the community carried over into our skills and practices. So that we're fairly successful on the safety side, let's still try some of the same techniques into the skill side and fairly move into that process. So right now we have a TCR, or actually it's a little lower than that, it's 0.47, North American company or group, which is pretty good. According to the industry standard, our goal was 0.49, something like that we do up there. But we do a lot of efforts in the safety side of the business to prevent injuries and skills in the first place. Just kind of give you an idea of what that PCR really means. If you start on the bottom left, gives you some average PCRs for groups. Univar is the dashed line there. The chemical manufacturing, those colors very well, but, is the purplish one. You can see that's probably right around 2. And the PCR, all industry, the green is up around 3, a little over that. The chemical distributors is the blue line, you see it's a little bit below 2. Transportation warehousing is way up there. So overall, we're doing a really good job. We're much lower than our average in our industry, and that's, we like to think because of all the efforts we take to try to promote. Some of the steps we do on safety, program called Serious About Safety. That really is our overall arching safety guideline for our company, and then within that, there's things we have like 12 life-saving rules. And those are posted there on right, and you probably can't read them, but those are rules that essentially every employee knows, because if they violate one of those, there's a good chance they'll know they have employees. It's that kind of a seriousness of an incident. These things can result in life, seriously harm to the so, we have every employee has the right to stop work. If they feel it's an unsafe operation, they can exercise their stop work authority, and they're expected to do that if they come across something unsafe. This includes our drivers when they're making delivery to customers. We have, just to kind of keep the importance on this, we have a 2-hour notification for any injury that goes right to the very top of the organization. It's notified within 2 hours of the report of an injury, and then we follow that up with 48-hour incident investigation reports through top management again at that point. Obviously we do have contingency plans, SPCC plans, for sites that are required. Evacuation drills we've done twice a year at least at every site, and we also have recognition programs. We call one of the budget and beyond call of duty. That's the ABCD. They get like $200 if they're not able to do that. And then we have a quarterly spotlight award. It's like a $2,100 award. And then we have a field observation program, which in the safety side, that's like behavior-based safety, a light version of it. And we also have annual EHS audit.
So Dan, I got your name from a firefighter in the room. Okay? Because I know you have a positive ongoing relationship with fire service. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, the Cincinnati site is located in Westchester Fire District. Since we do handle chlorine, which is one of the big concerns, or the specialized liquid that comes in the car, you're talking about basically 90 tons of the car. You can model that on air dispersion. You have a zero to 20 miles, 15 miles, something like that. So it is a big concern, and again, prevention is the key there. Knock on wood, so we don't have a very fun of it. We have not had a serious chlorine incident at all over the past 2 years. So we've done a really good job on minimizing that, and you can see that part of the secret here from Westchester. But I think they would agree that we've done a really good job on minimizing the incidents that we used to have.
And if there is a serious chlorine leak and there's a plume going towards a residential community, is that a house stay in place, or is that a get your kids and run?
That's really up to between the NC as well as EMA and all that. Generally, they're going to do shelter-in-place on site. The other shelter-in-place program for our employees that the morning release will do it shelter-in-place, and we actually bill on that as well. They have a designated room in the building where they go. We have plastic TV and stuff like that that they can close off with. Those type of things to shelter if they need to be until it's clear. And the county actually has a great reverse 911 system, I call it. I'm not sure if that's the official name. That can notify local people around us if we do have a release. And we'll also give them some guidelines on what to do. So I talked a little bit about the safety stuff. It really falls into the skill thing. We said, hey, we have not been doing a very good job of monitoring the village. So we instituted a similar program to the on the skill side, because of the safety side, all the 2-hour, the 48-hour, all the reporting, all that applies to the building as well. And this is just a start on our current performance and skills. We're still kind of working into the mode of getting everybody to actually report all skills. So we're not talking about significant ones in skills, we're talking about anything outside of the significant. So when you break it down from significant skills, which is over 200 pounds, it's not much, about 1 pound. But anything non-significant is less than 200 pounds. And then we start getting data on what the causes are, so we go back and work on how to stop these things, right? And prevention is our goal. Various policies there. One of the things we do is every customer we deliver bulk to, we have to go out and do a bulk profile. In other words, we review the site before we go there, we identify the tank, the size, the pictures of the facility, everything about it that we need to know. Do they have the adequate safety stuff, or do they unloading, over storm drain, those type of things, and we may decide not to have delivery there based on the bulk profile. We have many cases where there wasn't adequate safety water in place for our drivers, so they thought about delivering the corrosive, and so we won't make delivery until we do that there, or we bring portable safety water. Internally, we have a storage tank inspection program that includes monthly and annual inspections. Do monthly incident reviews where we share lessons learned among our companies internally. Also, do safety alerts and special things occasionally when we know the lessons learned type of things. And we encourage every site to know it.
Hey, Randy, do you mind if I ask you to come on up for a minute? All right. You mentioned Westchester.
Yeah.
And Randy, as you know, Randy Anderson is Assistant Chief for Westchester Fire. Tell me, from a fire perspective, what's the implications for you as an Assistant Chief when you've got chemical companies such as this and these products in your fire district?
Most places have a regional hazmat team. We're part of the regional hazmat team, so I have my own type 1 hazmat team inside the department. And the facility, when it came to us,
Yeah, we built that site in 1980.
that was a decision for the community at that time. We've got some now that like it, it's good or bad thing. I would probably say they're still our most prominent hazmat customers within the community, but as Al said, because we've worked with them, our guys are having training with them, they provide equipment, we're on a personal basis with them. That's the relationship that makes this work. The fact that we have prevention, yes, even though we have it, it's not a team, our exercise regularly, is a great thing. Because of that prevention methodology that's been put in place over the past year. So it's still the best to have that contingency if something were to go wrong. So I think Chris right off the meeting was pretty much what I would echo is in the fire service we always think we're the experts because nobody else is in the fire service, right? Nobody told us probably take that line of the first instead of the second. However, when you're in the hazmat world, they know the facility. No matter how much we're over there, no matter how much we're trained with them, they are the experts in the facility. And that's what you have to recognize as a responder. You're maybe not the most educated on the topic that you showed up for. You need to work with them, listen to them, make sure it obviously fits. There's something as simple as what Al has is tip-top shape. And we've got anything that they decide to do a chemical company overnight, we kind of know the difference between the two, and how much education and background they have. There's a different facility beyond this. But that is the key. They are the experts. You can probably listen to them and probably work with them well ahead of time.
Can you describe a little about pre-plans, fire infrastructure?
I go north out of my fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go up the towers, bro.
Yeah.
We do the same thing. No, it's been great with the Westchester Fire Department for the Cincinnati location. Great relationship with them. Unfortunately, years ago, we were not so good at prevention, and the last serious incident was we lost about 500 pounds of chlorine out of the container. I was there when that happened, unfortunately. say no good deed goes unpunished, we actually have our response team there practicing on a cylinder that we need to do something with back in the customer on the problem. And of course, everything went south very quickly, unfortunately. Yeah, so we rely on them for support. We have a very limited team, basically 6 to 8 members that we decided to take at this point. And we really rely on the fire department for every backup function, everything from dealing with the media, dealing with controlling access, communication to the community if necessary. So, and they allow us also to go in and do what we need to do. We do kind of working there with the tightening the process, we know what we need to go do. We work with the cleaning kits on a regular basis and dealing with those and should we do them. So, and they allow us to do that, and they help us out, like everything else, or as well as initial response.
So, hey, man, could you describe what kind of apparatus you have there, how many personnel?
So we're, let's call it block. Greater Cincinnati Hazmat is an individualized unit. The building team kind of runs independently. We've set up in Butler County is what we call a hazmat cooperative, so it's going to be facility management. For the weather, we do the same thing there. Anybody went to Middletown realizes that's a heavy industrial area. So in the 80s, we created what we call a hazmat cooperative where the 3 departments, Westchester, Hamilton, and Middletown, supply their own units, and then we kind of work with a mutual aid system back and forth. So they can handle their supplies, maybe another 5 to 10 people, and then that recall system. And we also have the departments that kind of lie in between those 3 are all operational support. So we call Liberty Township, we have operations and technicians, personnel that will come in and help support us and then backfill everything behind it. So it's an initial response, obviously because of the hazards we have, but then we also work together because we can't afford to put all 3 of those units in one place. Ironically, our apparatus is so overfull that it is in our capital improvement plan to buy another vehicle.
Wow, I'd like to open up, when you both up there, if you don't mind, the Q&A, some questions here, right? So, particularly, when you get toned out, you know where you're going, obviously you know you're going to the facility, but is there, from an incident command point of view, are you looking for Al or his counterpart when you get to that scene?
Yeah, so literally our tower 73 and hazmat 73, literally can be there in 20 minutes or less. It's literally around the corner. A lot of times it actually is just a significant event or everything. So we're relying upon them. I rely on my lieutenants and firefighters in our station 73 who are there every day. They're relaying information back to our battalions. All of our battalions have a pretty good background in hazardous materials response. It's all internal guys that kind of build up through this system. And then realistically, when I get there, just facilitating, making sure things happen back through our county GMA actually have a special operations coordinator that actually respond out to the scene. He's able to give us all the RDC information. He's getting in charge of research and help our guys doing the back end research. And then we also take care of any logistical support. So we've got that coming from the county aspect. But I really rely on heavily those first 2 firefighters and company officers that are in that district every day. Because realistically, none of those hazards exist in the house.
One of the nice things is now they bring on people. They'll ask us if we come out and do a walk around and show them the site, and we're more than happy to do that. Hopefully they understand we have an open office and we come out anytime. But we've also done some training, through COVID now, but with them on site, we've kept the car and empty car, we come out and back to do morning response kits, all cars, stuff like that. And our team also is locally works with transfer links and flooring side. Our team also is a member of the 4F network, and so we will respond to
That's the other thing is they have such a good response team that when they call us, it's not a break. They're coming over for a reason. It's usually not a
good reason, they do so much in summer. But when we get called, we actually know what we're doing.
I'd like to open any other questions? All right, and we'll take Mr. PowerPoint and we'll share it. All right, have a round of applause for both. All right, Dan and Chris, I mean, Chief Kelly already sang your praises, so, just want you to confirm that you play nice for the fire service, right?
Unfortunately for Chief Kelly, that's probably one of our dangerous plants in my time here. So, all flammable products. That's where we need our firefighters sometimes. So, I'm Dan Padani. I'm actually the plant manager in Lorraine, Ohio. Just right outside Dayton. CJ or Chris, that story is our operation manager in Cincinnati. Not the same location that Chief Kelly gets to respond to, but in the area. Alright, so I think these are kind of the four things we're going to go into this. A big part of our team is to have the recognition part, and our customers generally know what they're getting into, but we do get some customers who don't actually know what they have, so that's a big part of what we want people to know is what they actually have. The next two would be kind of how a customer would interact with us and how we would get involved with it, and then have an overview of what the air gas and everything. So the arrow, the air gas and rescue optimization. First thing is hazard recognition. What are we dealing with on site? Is it a bulk product or a packaged gas? You recognizing if there's a vapor cloud, and the indicator of how you can respond. Types of containment, UN numbers, placards, NFPA, 7. So that's going to be an indicator of what we're walking into. I'd say 95% of the time, customer calls, says, hey, hydrogen tank leaking. We know what we need to do. But there are cases where we're walking into one on the left, any bottled gas, which we call that packaged gas. On the right, you see these things. We're going to do bulk gas. You mentioned vapor cloud. This is kind of an example of the time. And it's something we would want to know and how we respond to it. More types of cylinders, runners on the right, and all the way down to this smallest cylinder you can imagine that might have experience something. It's liquid or gas cylinders, so putting things in vapor phase will help you kind of respond to specific products. Bulk tanker truck, another bulk tanker truck in the middle was a heat code, gas. And then this, we respond to something we generally like to notice. Most of the time we'll know what we're getting into most of the time. A lot of our customers that have a lot of dangerous things, most of the time it's only limited to, so we usually know kind of what we're getting into. It's important to know the size of the container we're using. A lot of responses will be cascading product into another container. When you have a cylinder that's leaking, you need to ensure that you take that product into another cylinder. You have to have enough space to do that. So if you get a hold of us, you call that number, and that's mentioned for the closest brand. All of our brand personnel trained. Get all the information from you, ask some general questions, and then they know who all the other members are that reach out to Dan or any of our leaders, and then kind of engage with you. So a list of contacts. So Jeff Cummings is our aero team coordinator. We have 14 leaders that we take this call. We're all trained the same way. We're available for customers. So what we do specifically, priorities, protection of the responders, protection of the public, protection of the environment, the property, and relative severity of the problems. Our technicians cover the United States. We actually have a rule in the company that we can't sell any time, and I remember looking at Palm Beach well. So, we do cover, our team is, Ohio from Western Pennsylvania, we have a team in Michigan as well, that we all kind of work with those guys, they're part of our league. But our primary specialty is in compressed gases. We can respond to rail cars, and we've never had to do that yet. But really, we primarily doing cylinders.
So for example, here at Sharonville Fire Department, you describe what kind of gases would be, that are within the building.
Imagine oxygen.
Oxygen on ambulances. Yep. Some of that, on some of the ambulances. Yep. Yep. Acetylene, potentially. You guys use any acetylene? No? Anything else? Yeah. Right. Okay. And when the fire department wants to restock, do they go to you, or you show up with a big container and transfer it? How that work?
It's usually just called a local branch. We are Argus itself is a distributor of all these products. So we do have tractor trailers, trucks, grain trucks,
They'll come out here.
Yep, we transfer from directly to the customer. Right? So we have medical specifically, we have box trucks that we do the products into. But it's actually come out of my facility. We service Cincinnati.
Yeah, so for example, for the ambulances, do they need to back out of the facility when they're being refilled, or can you do that right inside the
Usually
van?
we take the cylinder out and just change it.
Oh, you change the cylinders, because some of those cylinders can be quite large, as you know.
Do you have any EMS units now going to liquid oxygen?
Some, not many. Right now they're just still using a small tank because they're easier to fit in the bags, but I think it's Middletown Fire Department, not very good. And I believe Lebanon as well.
What does that mean? Liquid oxygen?
It's sold in a cold phase, essentially.
Do you have to keep the cylinder cold?
No, it's designed to stay cold, but there are valves on it that it'll come out in gas state or the phase. Depends on the section. Yep, yeah. So this is kind of example of what we do. We're all trained to level A with an SCBA. We're looking for us monitoring our environment. We do that the entire time we're doing anything. Because if we get to a situation that's even remotely dangerous, we're all stop, pull out, examine what's going on, and figure out what we want to do from there. We have containment devices, that's what that is, down there. And they allow us to, you can take a cylinder, put it in there, and pressurize nitrogen on top of it, and wipe it around it, and stop it from moving. So we have devices like that that we use to get products out, and then we can get them back to our facility, and we can better use them. That's just a containment device to get it off the customer's property. So the fire department, so the customer wants this out of here. We'll contain it, bring it back to our facility, and then get it there. Because a lot of times these gases can be shutting down the facility. So we talk about evacuating a facility. We don't make that decision. The fire department will make that decision, but there's certain instances we can definitely recommend it. This is an example of random products that we have that might be something we would respond to. So inert products are essentially argon healing and nitrogen, which are not the largest concern. Pyrophorics, sound, toxin, those will actually explode when the stuff is there. So if one of those are leaking, it's a very bad situation. Flammables, talk about acetylene, hydrogen, propane, propylene. Oxidizers, really being the oxygen and itself. Our most responses are actually with the toxics, sulfur dioxide, chlorine, hydrogen chloride, I would say, and ammonia, we report largely responses. And coincidentally, they're the foremost dangerous products.
So if you have a leak at a facility and a 911 call goes to dispatch, hopefully the dispatcher is informed of the nature of the chemical leak on the best circumstances.
Yeah, a lot of the times, customer will call it right after that, they don't call the fire department. There have been times where, actually in Columbus, CJ used to work, there was a heating propane tank where they called the fire department, they called air gas, everyone's there. Air gas shows up with the product, the fire department's kind of, you guys good? You got groceries in the car, we're gonna head back to the station. They laughed, we had cover, no concern from the fire department standpoint there.
Now, a lot of times we're finding that the propane tank leaks, and it's not, that plane isn't impacting any structure, it's a leak.
There are several responses, like, I mean, we have, I'd say down in this area, settling is probably the biggest leak we have. You take a tank and you honestly just create fire out of it. You just light up the water out. Once the tank's empty, you take it out, you scrap it. Essentially, we're creating a fire.
Your ACL at the back, right?
Yeah. For hydrogen fluoride?
At the back. But, so what's your, what would be your response plan if you have a leak in the
Depending on how much is in it, we scrubbed it, essentially put the gas into water, a base solution, to put the acid into create a neutral solution.
Do you use any type of filters?
No, customers do it. That's how we find out about leaks. Customers call their gas cabinet alarms going off. They find they have a leak in the system.
I just said, if we have, sometimes they have an obvious.
And how come when I take my, my outdoor cooker, when I take my old tank to the hardware store and they say, I can't use that anymore. What's happened? What's the change?
Every tank is sensitive to shelf life. It's like a food product. So everything has an expiration date. So specifically with propane, new tanks are good for 10 years to be filled. They can go through a requalification process every 5 years. So you look at gases, destroy the internal cylinder. So bad things can happen. In fact, we had a tank yesterday, a carbon dioxide tank, which is no immediate danger, but there was actually pop inside the cylinder. So the customer actually backflowed soda into the cylinder. So water-based, water and CO2 creates an acid inside that cylinder. And over time, actually destroy inside the cylinder.
So it's not just a hardware store trying to sell me new tanks.
Yeah. We'll do the same thing too. So we qualify things ourselves too.
Oh,
So it's kind of like a full stop shop. So once you resell it,
yeah. Any other questions? All right, have a round of applause. Okay, Rob Warfel is going to come up next. Known Rob for many, many years. And Rob has retired after a career in the FBI, and he just can't retire. So you know what he's doing now? He's the police chief of a little university here called Xavier.
Oh, the other guy.
The other guy. And delighted to be here.
thanks, Larry. I appreciate the invitation.
And Rob and Steve Kelly are taking over my terrorism and homeland security course. Because in retirement, I'm just going to teach one legal course, right? Course on legal foundation. And I'm delighted they're taking it over because once again, the National Fire Academy has tentatively agreed, we're meeting next week, that our terrorism and homeland security course will become a model to be taught by universities all over the nation. So I don't want to put any pressure on you guys, but it's wonderful. And I really appreciate your skills and your knowledge and your willingness to teach that course.
That was quite the introduction, and way to stall there while I'm pulling that up, so I appreciate it. So Larry, thank you for the invitation to come out here, as well as UC Fire Science and the emergency management. and for everyone who's attending today, whether it's virtually or here present. And I'd like to highlight these three key elements that you've heard some of the other presenters talk about, but from a law enforcement standpoint, the collaboration, communication capability. What are you bringing to the table? And hopefully the first time you meet that one of these incidents is not over that smoking hole at the incident site. And certainly, I think, is our colleague, where's my colleague from, oh, we have to, had a part, duck out. Again, it's a relationship that we've established in that level in the neighborhood, which is one of the areas that Xavier touches. But in my previous career, I had the privilege of serving in various capacities, one of which was in the hazardous materials response, weapons of mass destruction arena, and aligned directly with collaboration with the public and private sector. So we did a lot of outreach, a lot of coordination, whether that's tracking down chemical orders throughout the country after the events of September 11th in 2001, or engaging directly with entities of the public and private sector to understand essentially what was in our backyard, what's in your neighborhood, what is there. So the programs that emerged from this, created in the Federal Bureau of Investigation after September 11th, really transformed the agency. And it historically was aligned for incredible investigative capabilities and the ability to look at things, but now what it did is position those agents, the personnel, and really the U.S. government to try to disrupt and deter incidents or attacks before they happen. So that's why these relationships between the government and the private and the public sector are so critical. It needs to be strong so that information and intelligence is able to be shared and leveraged to prevent incidents and protecting the communities that we serve. But that part of that mission is, and where it expanded, was involving hazardous materials, recognizing chemical, biological, radiological threats that could potentially be accessible or in the communities. And this also includes weapons of mass destruction. I'll talk a little bit about that, but there happens to be another subject matter expert close by. So, with the units, where I work, some of that about my bureau career was about 22 years. Half of that I spent in this arena, hazmat and W&D response. I joined the bureau in '97, so as you can see right here, they started these specialty units in '96. So I'm happy to say that I had the opportunity to be a test pilot for some of the programs, a little bit of a guinea pig in some instances for the training and the certification process, which also at that time included an 80-hour organic chemistry review. And boy, I just, as a recovering attorney, I gotta tell you, I love that class. I have a lot of respect for the folks that are in that field, but for us it was about safety. It was about learning where our limitations were and the potentials that were there. So these units were field tested and adapted a lot of their response capabilities since those early years in '01 and moving forward. And you can see some of those pictures here from September 11th, some of those major sites where they provided that hands-on support, but also when the Columbia disintegrated on reentry. That was, again, a partnership and a team that went over 3 different states and utilizing a number of resources and some fantastic science and engineering to determine where those materials, individuals, and even some of the remains were to land and recover. Also, you see, of course, the ricin and some of the white powder incidents. These were the hallmark of a lot of the response and why these elements were so important. But let me talk a little bit about beyond that. I wanted to give you at least what happens when there's collaborative support for whether that's a railway, a company, a municipality, or the National Transportation Safety Board. I want to talk to you about a quick case study. Now, this is a long time ago. I saw some folks in the back of the room who, yeah, Larry, we've known each other a long time. They may not even have been born when this happened. So I do want to share about the Norfolk Southern derailment, which happened in Graniteville, South Carolina in '05. And why I am doing this is to give you an idea of what happens. What happens if something were to occur? So let me set the scene. A lot of these photos and the images that you're seeing are the courtesy of, I gotta give them credit, the Augusta Chronicle, which was down there. And believe me, you're going to have some sort of media presence in the event of one of these incidents, regardless of how widespread or where this occurs, they're going to be on scene. That's part of your response planning as well. But in these incidents, what happened? There was a train that was going on the main line, got diverted and hit a parked freight train. So the question really came down. You had the Norfolk Southern Train 192 was northbound on that mainline track about 2:40 a.m. Going roughly 45, 49 miles an hour. Multiple hazardous materials, cars, and things on that line. Where did the bulk of our penalties go? In the U.S., you heard in the presentations from the private sector here, rail accessible, rail accessible. That's where a lot of this stuff is moving. So, that question then, it hits that thrown switch, plows into a local Norfolk Southern train, causing a release of chlorine from a rail tank. And we also heard, what's the capacity? About 90%. So, this is a problem at 2:40 a.m. To give you an overview again, this is from the Chronicle. Looking at the site, you can see the lines here. You have that main line, and the switch up here, deviating that train right into the back of the one that was on that side rail or that sidewalk. A little closer to the incident, you can see, just to give you the orientation, and also, quite frankly, the scope of what had occurred in this small little town. The result, the immediate result, was 8 people, 8 fatalities. Many of those were working at a local mill that was close by, or a local company that was close by. Another was a truck driver that was sleeping in his cab of a vehicle close to the incident site. And the 9th person that passed away did so. It took a little bit of time, but was the engineer of the train. He died after the incident, not immediately. About 240 admitted to the local hospital. So my fire, EMS, and first responders, think about those collaborative plans of mutual aid that's going to be required when you have to have this type of response, and then also the sensing and the capabilities that are being brought up to scene. Where's the cloud going? Where's the plume? What are the threats that are present? You don't necessarily know immediately what that may be. And who is our person that's talking about the rail, and who carries the manifest and the content that's on that?
The conductor.
The conductor and the engineer. If those folks just happen to be incapacitated or out of the question, you might be having a little bit of a difficulty tracking down that content that's in that large rail. So we have a continuing leak that's ongoing in this scene. But the question now, we're not too far away from 2001. And so there's a lot of concern, a lot of debate, and certainly the lead here is the National Transportation Safety Board. They're the primary investigative agency for these incidents. They've got that specialty Office of Railroad, Pipeline, and Hazardous Materials Investigation. But what if it's an intentional act? Was it a terrorist related? Was it someone that was trying to do something nefarious? Was it a disgruntled employee? Was there something that someone did, or could it be someone just screwing around besides, hey, I can throw this switch, not knowing the impact of the intent that may have? So with that in mind, there has to be a cooperative effort. And much like we have with aircraft crash investigations and others, the FBI has an established relationship, a memorandum of understanding, so local agents from that regional area are dispatched to the incident command or to the command post, and there is that request for additional assistance. Thankfully, at this point, those resources existed. And so out the door they went, and responding to the Unified Command Post, and under ICS, that's where they plug in. Not interfering with emergency operations, not stepping into the realm, but under that operations branch, helping aid that investigation, totally encapsulated, no pun intended, for the resources that are there, but they operated in well way. And in this instance, because of that ongoing release, someone else was mentioning about the vinegar. That had an IDLH of 50, which is pretty small. This had an IDLH of 10. So, knew that they had to be protected as they're going into that. This was one of the first times that rarely level A is used in what we do because we're there after the scene, after the incident has settled down a little bit. But they documented the railroad switch, wanted to determine really what was happening, the operational capability or the function of it. Was there any forensic evidence that was there, looking at the handle of the switch, be able to retrieve that and bring it back. We conduct our operations much like any, and I say we, used to, the Bureau conducts their operations when they respond to these things, much like any well-skilled group with safety officers. We have the subject matter experts, whether that be chemists, in this instance, biologists as well, can bring out and can be brought to bear on these incidents. Site safety plan is developed. We do they do their own medical monitoring, and then proceed to go into that environment. Monitoring consistently while downrange and conducting those operations. And in this instance, using an electric cart to transfer down and get back. You know if you're operating in that PPE, a little bit bulky, not the easiest thing to move around in. So using something that it also is not have a combustion engine or the potential of anything else or any other hazards that might be present. And then this is where the partnership comes into play. Ultra is one of the railroad contractors for derailments and has a lot of contracts and agreements nationwide. Having them on site, using the resources that are there and integrating with the support that is already in place is fundamental to the successful operation of these and resolution of these incidents. So just as they're moving into the scene, to give you a little bit closer idea of what was captured there by the photographers, what you see here, that's the switch in question. That was what was covered over. They recognized, hey, there might be something here. Looking a little closer there, you can see at first blush there appears to be that lock still in place, but it was cut out entirely, recovered, brought back to the area. Part of the decontamination, as they went through, then these items were also recovered. You see the Ultra folks here; they're the ones that provided this particular photograph. And then, what happens next? That evidence is treated as such, brought back for laboratory analysis. There are specialty units that will look specifically at that. I will also comment that there are, for any materials that might be recovered in a hazardous environment, where there is still a hazard to that particular material that's being handled, there are agreements with the national laboratories and resources that have been set up in those partnerships with the FBI's laboratory, FBI laboratory down in Quantico, Virginia, so they can go to those sites so that traditional kind of analysis and forensic recovery can take place. In this instance, the firearms and full marks unit was looking to see if there was anything of tampering or had that switch been manipulated, had the lock been changed or cut off. Nothing was determined, nothing from latent prints. So really, then the standard interview process, the law enforcement interview of the folks that were there, of the train crew, of the people that managed the track, what was the role, what happened, going back, trying to create that timeline leading up to 2:40 in the morning on the 5th. So on the 6th. So what happened that evening before on the 5th? What was the process? All of that gets combined together, ultimately to determine, hey, this is not an intentional act. This was an accident. Passes all of that off to the NTSB, and then that continues. Meanwhile, the incident is still ongoing, mitigating the concerns and the threats to release and starting that cleanup and the rebuilding process, as well as what is happening in that small town. So the NTSB completes that final report and the ultimate recommendation. Now, where else do we have these relationships? Where else does I tell you, it's hard habit to break, but where does law enforcement at the federal level have these relationships? And both DHS, FBI have invested a tremendous amount of resources to build networks and liaison and collaboration at the airports. Now, the Bureau itself has and these sources, you can track this is right off of their webpage, publicly accessible and out there, but I want you to know that there is that presence at the nation's ports of entry, specifically related to air, also to maritime. Because where do we have these large bulk shipments to? We talked about rail, but also maritime is coming and going off of the waterways. Someone else had brought up the importance of the Coast Guard relationship. Their resources and network are integrated with ours, or with the federal government's on that broader scale. And part of that overarching view is through the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the executive committee, where they invite a lot of local folks to take part, get the clearances, and they're able to share intelligence and information that might be relevant to, again, what is going on in your region or your area. So the maritime liaison, they've got personnel that are specifically focused and partnering with the private sector, with the public sector, with those other entities and resources. But wait, there's more. It doesn't stop there. It extends also to the bridge, which is why I'm talking about that relationship. There's a strong partnership with many of those, whether it be Norfolk Southern, CSX, even many of their agents take part in local JTTF as well. But last but not least, and I would be remiss if I didn't highlight it, if you don't already know about it, but certainly your best resource for opening a lot of these relationships within the federal government, within my former employer and the FBI, is your weapons of mass destruction force. Their role, their purpose in the 56 field offices is to engage that private sector, public sector, the partnerships to form that collaboration. They would have been, and that first call from the Carolina field office to look for those resources, getting personnel out to the scene, and networking to get those specialty response and boots onto the ground. That individual, those individuals are truly the tip of the spear in these incidents and those relationship building. And their sole purpose is to facilitate that outreach and engagement and bringing to bear the resources and response capabilities that I just addressed in this particular incident. So I am happy to say that here, at least within our region and within Cincinnati field office, I know I used to work with a guy, fantastic, one of the best throughout the nation. And I don't say that just because he may or may not be here, but the fact being, truly, that's your point of contact, and that's the person that, if you don't have that relationship already established, I encourage you to do so from both the public side and the private side. And I'd be remiss, I don't know how this slide got up there, but I'm sorry, it fell into the deck. But I do appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I'll open it up to any questions.
Well, let's focus on Xavier for a minute. From a law enforcement perspective, what's the challenges of protecting the chemicals that are used at a university?
Well, and that's, you think about your community. You know, from a municipality standpoint, you want to know where things are stored. You've heard about the relationships and the outreach that are going at the broader scale. If you think about a university as a small microcosm or a small community of itself, if you have any sciences, if you have any experiments, if you have any kind of research that goes on, I guarantee you have chemicals, hazardous chemicals, things that are going to be placarded, you have radiological sources, you have other things that are there that might or might not necessarily be in any sort of a security measure or track in how they operate on a day-to-day basis. So from my standpoint, that is one of the areas that I was concerned when I first arrived, is getting out and talking to the folks in the chemistry department, talking to the folks that are in biology as well, to find out where do we have this stuff stored, what are some of the vulnerabilities that they see, and how can we maybe harden the access and better track that. So I'm happy to say that we've taken a few steps in that.
So one thing is word hardening, another is security of the props and students who are handling this. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, that goes back to the tracing and the tracking. One of the great things about academia, they love to share, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're in this forum and putting that forward. But the access, I think that Larry brings up, that's one of the critical points, and it's stressing the importance of who has the access to these, what is it used for, are there limitations on amounts? You know, if you have a small amount of something which is fine, it's innocuous, it's used for a test or for some sort of research, but in a larger amount or in concentration or otherwise. So who has accessibility to that? How is that tracked? How is it regulated? Getting those standards and protocols in place are really critical to the overall community safety.
And I've had the pleasure of attending several FBI presentations at UC. And one of the messages is, if you're going overseas to make a presentation, all right, you don't take your laptop. You take a borrowing laptop, if you will, with that presentation only. And I'm like, whoa, I hadn't thought about that.
Well, and that, you bring up a great point, and some of the other resources that are available, I think there are a number of folks from the foreign counterintelligence side that are happy to, once again, reach out, provide some of that guidance and support.
I'd like to open up the Q&A. If anyone want to know anything else about this topic.
Sir, where does having a lot of students, a new undergrad researcher every semester, where does that kind of start to factor in, especially when you talk about like UC as a nuclear engineering department where you can do research and have someone new handling these radiological materials every semester?
Well, I think part of the struggle, and that's where the balance with particularly higher education is you may be drawing a lot of international students. And there's a certain level of vetting that goes through that process as you're bringing them on board or bringing them into the student body. But generally speaking, not too much. They're going to pay the tuition, So, but the question really comes down to is there any concern? What is the bigger picture? Getting that at least discussion on the table, I think, is a big step in the right direction.
I want a round of applause. Thanks for your PowerPoint on my computer. I'll hear it.
I'll tell you what, I'll get that for you.
I just that last slide.
Yeah.
That kind of wraps it all together.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bob, thank you so much for presenting. Coming down from Toledo. You have to leave early this morning?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. All right. Bob Krause is a county chief with the Toledo Fire Department with a EDD. I've come to learn what an EDD is as opposed to a PhD, right? And we're honored to have you. And you've just been hired as an adjunct cop, right? And so thank you very much. We're honored to have you.
Thanks. Who's the chemical students, the environmental students? Raise your hands up. I can see the blue shirts, so I know where you guys come from. So I'm going to talk briefly. There's only 8 slides. So briefly, I'm going to talk to you guys because this is the interface. And this is the interface between what we're going to be doing and when they show up. All right? So you and I are going to get there early on. And I think I just need to click that, right? You and I are going to get there early on, and we're going to develop this relationship. And you've heard all morning long about relationship building, right? And that's really important because when we're running an incident and these foreigners start showing up into our incident, right? They're not fire service personnel. We have to understand who they're, why they're there, and who they are. You guys who are coming into our environment, it's you're coming into our space now. And so you need to be able to work within that incident command system, be able to understand the functionality and how important you are. So when we run multi-incident scenarios, for example, I had a release in a federal courthouse. Who do you think showed up at a federal courthouse hazardous materials? The FBI showed up, right? So there's got to be those relationships built, and it's important for you guys to understand the system you're going into. Conversely, it's important for you guys to understand what they bring to the table to help mitigating scenarios. And that's really important, and that's why this class or this type of training is so valuable. Because you can't show up, and you've heard throughout the morning that relationships are very important issue. If you look at this, and when this happens, and it's not a great slide now that I look at the lighting, but what have we got there? We've got some rail cars in the water. The fire service in and of itself is not going to mitigate that problem by itself. We're going to start it out, right? But who are some of the things that we should be thinking about in the fire service? Who should we be thinking about coming? Tell me. The Coast Guard is going to come because it's a water incident, right? What about EAP? What about, does this need to be a federal incident? Do we need mitigation from environmental services? Do we need chemical guys? Now we're going to get to the chemical guys in a little bit. But so this is a big deal. So don't think that we're going to operate within our own little bubble. And that fire service is going to sit over here, and law enforcement is going to sit here, and chemical, and you guys are over there. It can't work out that way successfully, especially
when you have complex products. This happened a few months ago in Toledo. This is a scrapyard. It was a motor vehicle scrapyard. Bunch of crap. There was tires and all kind of stuff going on. This is a multi-dimensional incident here. If you look along the top of the scene, there's a rail running right there, isn't there? Within 2 months of this incident, a similar area happened in another part of the city. And what we had there is we've got to be concerned from a fire service point of view. What kind of hazards do you see here as a fire service? Now, I'm not talking about just fire service personnel. Okay? What other things might be important to you? And one of the first things that was called for in this incident were environmental services, right? Because that smoke plume is going somewhere. Look at this plume. Do you think that this might have some concerns? Any environmental guys, chemical guys back there? Does that raise any concerns for you whatsoever? What? Tell me. What's it? Just black smoke. Who gives? What the hell? What's the problem? Well, pollution's one. How about downrange? So there's a lot of things. If you see the importance of having yourselves involved in that unified command post, fire service, we're pretty smart guys and girls. We're pretty smart, but we don't know everything, right? So we need the chemical people, we need the environmental people to give us guidance on how to mitigate that. There might be products in that facility that need special extinguishment agents that we just don't have. And maybe the chemical guys, once they realize what's burning, can say, hey, if you use this and this and this, it'll go out a hell of a lot easier. So those words, the collaboration comes in. Fire service, if you take a look at this, just look at this for a moment. And you are looking at this from a suppression issue. Suppression is one of our issues, but isn't containment. So we're not going to control that smoke plume. We're not going to be able to contain that. But we have to think about such as things you've heard earlier. And these are important, guys. We're using AFFF. Okay? We used AFFF on the two of the big crash fires that we had, the cars and the shredded metals and all of the other products. AFFF, is that a problem? It is a problem. Do we need to have environmental, do we need to have chemistry people in there, and what are they going to do for us? If we have water runoff, we need to have an idea. If there's a stream nearby, they need to be able to be involved in that to test the downstream products. We heard about that from rail earlier today. So when you look at these scenarios, please don't isolate yourselves as this is a fire service incident. It is not simply a fire service incident. It's a multi-jurisdictional incident. And some of those things that you as operational guys, who's the officer? Just because you got the silver hair. That's the way it works out. As you guys are operating in this environment, when you see something, you see that maybe that there's chemicals or there's runoff going into a stream, you need to tell incident command. Because from a particular vantage point, he or she may not have full idea of what is burning and be able to look at that. Okay, look at this one. Any environmental concerns here? Anybody? Bueller? What? What environmental concern?
Possible toxins and poisons in that gas cloud.
What do I care? I got an SCBA.
Not everyone will.
There you go. That's right. So that has downrange effects. Okay, so that's why it's important when you look at these incidents, fire service, to engage these other agencies early and extract what they can have. Now, chemical, environmental, you're coming into a different environment now. You're coming into an active, very dynamic scene. You need to find out where command posts are, who can I talk to, and then don't leave, right? I may use you, and I'll use Larry as an example. He might be the chemical guy who's coming into the, and I'll tell him, sit right there and don't move. When I need you, I'll come to get you, and I'll expect you to give me insight. Do you know what an ERG is? Chemical guys, environmental guys, you know what an ERG is? Find out. Find out what the emergency response guide is and what it can tell you. Fire service knows it. You guys should know that so that you can advise a incident commander who may not have that depth of knowledge that you can help them with. Okay? Unified command and problem solving. If you look at this is after Ida. Ida came through and tumbled all of these different hazardous materials together in a cockpit. Now, this is, we don't have active fire, we don't have a lot of things, but is this an incident that needs mitigation over time? And certainly, it's not one-dimensional. You might have law enforcement involved. You'll have LEPC. You'll have
chemical guys, you'll have environmental guys. So think about the need for unified command and problem solving. Because this is where we're gonna mitigate the problem, or we're gonna stop the problem, and then we're gonna figure out how the long-term fix of it is. So fire service, chemical, environmental need to work together, and you guys need to feel comfortable coming into that dynamic area. You know, you can't hide in the university labs all the time. You gotta come out here, right? You gotta come out here and get dirty a little bit. And sometimes it's gonna be 3 in the morning. Sometimes it's gonna be 20 degrees outside. Sometimes it's gonna be 90 degrees. Sometimes it's gonna be snowing, raining. You need to be able to come out to us, and we need to be able to work together. And you've heard all morning long about the importance of relationship, and I cannot be overstressed. Okay? Here's another opportunity. You think there's any problems here?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of things to concern ourselves with here. So this is where this is an opportunity to develop, and this is where tabletop exercises. I would encourage you to involve yourself in tabletop exercises. If you haven't taken a class in the fire service program or in your specific disciplines on managing these kind of case studies, this is a great opportunity to do that. Because if you're going to be involved in environmental health or in chemistry and some of these other things, these are the kind of things you've got to be able to deal with on short notice. We're not going to schedule this fire with you. Right? You're going to need to come out at whatever time it happens. All right? So those are the things that you need to think of. Any questions about any of that? What do you think? You ready to go? I don't know about that now. Hold on. You said this was just a little seminar. Any questions about anything?
Yeah, what kind of fire is that?
I don't know. You know?
Big one.
Yeah. You know, here's the thing. Okay, so what would you want to do? You know, I guess a lot of things is, and you've heard this morning, you want to talk with plant operations. What do you have here? Okay, what's burning? What do you have here? What area is that? And then understanding, especially for the suppression people, they have to understand the areas where we need to work. If you look back in 2013, I'll give you a great example. 2013, West Texas. There was a fertilizer plant. Okay? Little tiny fertilizer plant, a little small volunteer fire department in the area. They had never pre-planned the facility. One of the volunteer firefighters worked at the plant where they had thousands of pounds of ammonium nitrate. Okay? He told the rest of his colleagues, well, it's not really a problem. It's not really a problem. Within a very short amount of time, there was a mass detonation and killed them all. Boom. It's on video, you can see. And so this is where the pre-planning, suppression people have to know what's going on out there. You have to know your response agencies. And you have to make contact with the plant representative. What in the hell is in that tank? And then make decisions based on that information. You may not know. You may need chemistry to say, hey, look, that's going to blow up, or we're all going to get blown up. Environmental, you may say, you know, if that plume continues, you're going to have another boat fall in your case. So that's why these relationships and development within that command post are so pivotal. Yes, sir.
This is a girl question. In terms of the command post, will that usually be set up by the fire department, EMS, or how do you actually set up the command post?
Okay. I'll repeat the question. Yes, the question is who sets up the command post? Fire service does. Now, if it's clearly a law enforcement issue, that's one thing. But most of all of this is a fire service issue. Okay? Fire service is going to set up the command post. It's going to be plain as day, or it should be plain as day, where that command post has been established. It's not going to be next to the building. All right? It's going to be out of the way where there'll be entry points for you. So fire will maintain the command post. Fire will work to develop a unified command. A unified command is chemistry, environmental, law enforcement, LAPC. All of these subject matter experts, as an incident commander, I may make the decision, but I'm going to get his opinion, I'm going to get his opinion, I'm going to get her opinion, and then I'm going to formulate the data, and I'm going to make decisions based on that information. That's where it all happens. On large-scale incidents, you may open up an emergency operations center, and that's even remote from that.
Now, this would be like, in practical terms,
Okay, that's a great question. This here is probably more than a couple hours operation. Okay, this could be a day's operation where you may have to consider, hey, how do I rotate crews in and out? How do I provide for a bathroom? How do I provide for nourishment? Because if you're rotating crews, how do I provide for shade from the heat or the cold? Some agencies have mobile command posts. In Toledo, they're gonna be saddled up with me behind a Tahoe on my drive board as we put stuff together.
Whereas here in Hamilton County, we have a massive mobile command vehicle. And DJ, you can describe that at our next session, all right, about a command vehicle? All right, you would? Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
Where does medicine come in?
Well, I heard that earlier this morning, and I started to think, and I think in the opening salvos of this event, medicine's not my issue. That's not on my high things that I got to deal with. The more I thought about it as I listened, the medical monitoring is something that I think needs to be talked about, and it was brought up by BJ and where it comes from. I think medicine, we set up rehab within an incident as fire crews come out of that environment. We set up rehab to medically monitor them with our EMS agencies. And then if we have different trip numbers that we look for, they get sent out to the hospital. But in mass medicine, I don't think we're addressing that as this is unfolding.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
You spoke about the involvement with chemical and environmental. Would that be from people internal to whoever's looking at that plant, or externally, like involved with hazmat and that kind of it?
Both, because if they're all blown up, all right? If they're all blown up, I need somebody else to tell me what's going on. So I'm gonna converse with their subject matter experts within the agency, but then I'm also gonna, if you have something to offer, and I'll give you an example. If you guys are academics, and you're university, what school do you guys go to? Okay, that's not that other one. All right, okay. Well, I've had chemical releases within the university, in the University of Toledo. And who do I rely on? I rely on the academics in the chemical engineering program to give me guidance on what is the hell are in those labs. So there's that interface. So I don't want you to think you're excluded from the environment. Right? What you have to offer is extremely important, and you should talk to your program chairs. What can you guys do to get more experience into what if I'm going to that? Yes, sir.
How unfortunate is it that when we as chemical engineers and environmental engineers, when we're communicating with the fire service, to communicate clearly and in a way, because to take the very academic into a very practical.
Here you go. We cuss. Okay? We cuss. So you got it. As we're getting down here, you cuss, and if you start talking to me about biomedical triazoline, tupolene, I'm going to say, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Just talk to me so I can understand what it is you're trying to get. Don't try to impress me with your academic degrees at that point. Tell me that shit's burning, and I got to put it out, and what I need to do to put it out. And so there's where that communication comes in. But don't be afraid. Most of the incident commanders, that they're pretty locked on, they're pretty focused, they know what's going on, but you've got to communicate with them directly. And when I come at you with stuff, answer my questions, give me the information I need. Don't get offended if I snap at you a little bit, and then I'll get right back to you, because that's what's going to happen. But don't be afraid to communicate with the guy who's asking questions, or the girl who's asking questions. Yes, sir.
If you have one of these fires, also a mass casualty event, is that so? Where like in terms of logistics, the command post, where do they typically set up as opposed to like the triage of people coming out? Is that how do you?
You have a big incident like this with and let's say now we've got multiple casualties, you're almost going to have to bifurcate that into two incidents. One, it's all under the same incident command, but it starts breaking down. This is a fire incident, this is an EMS incident. You'll put people in place to start running the EMS sector where physicians may come in. I mean, that's not out of the question. So depending on the complexity of the incident, and here's where it's important, your understanding of ITS. Where does it start to bifurcate off? Here's the fire, here's rescue, here's this. Where does the EMS come over? Where's air go? Where's transportation go? Those are all things that you can participate in and effectively help mitigate the scenario. So there's spaces for you.
And how much of the that you have people coming off and how much of like the decontamination?
Good.
Or how much of that's done by EMS?
Well, I don't want any of my EMS touching the contaminated patients, right? I want my decon, my hazmat guys and girls doing the decon. So we'll decon them the best we can and then ship them off here. But even if it's gross decon, but we have plans in place, which I recommend all of you guys, chemical, environmental docs, to know how do we mass decon? Do we set rigs up and we walk them through the shower? I mean, how do we do that? And then you get them, and I'm done. Here you go. They're all yours.
Any other questions?
Sir.
About external, it's chemical versus environmental. We're really specialists in one particular aerosols. We'll talk about this COVID. Obviously, these fires happen, not 9 to 5, and that makes you guys very vulnerable. How's that incident humanity trying to get to that right special?
Well, as far as respiratory protection, everybody that enters that environment, once we determine what the environment is wearing or should be wearing the proper respiratory protection. Okay? Once they come out, we try to decon them, then we try to make sure we do some medical monitoring on them. So they're
Everybody coming out.
Yep. So especially if we're dealing with a hazard, when we send a hazmat team in, a hazmat team is assessed physically, they're assessed mentally, they've got vital signs taken, all those things are happening. They go in, they do their work, they come out, they're reassessed. And so that's where that medical monitoring comes in. I don't know if that answered the question.
How's that incident humanity trying to get to that proper specialist externally?
I gotta be truthful with you. I'm not thinking about that right as the first incident is unfolding. Those are kind of post-event, and as we get individuals out that we need to get to medical monitoring, I'm sorry I don't have a good answer for you there, but I don't know how to answer that specific question. All I can tell you is what we do in my area, which is they get assessed going in, they get assessed going out, and then if something else manifests itself, then we send them to the occupational health guys and girls to dig in deep.
All right, have a round of applause, huh? All right, here's what we're going to do to wrap up, all right? I'm going to ask BJ to come on up here, all right, and describe incident command and our Hamilton County equipment. And outside, all right, is one of our trailers. And we're all going to be going through the trailer, right, so you understand what we can bring to a scene. Before we do that, we have several members of our Greater Cincinnati Hazmat unit here in the room. I'm going to ask each to come on up and simply describe what their day job is and why they are a member of our team. So you have some sense of our skill set. So BJ, tell us about Hamilton County communications and how we play together at scenes.
Well, I'm retired from the Civil Captain as fire chief in 2012, but before that, I was actively involved in county fire chief. One of the big things is the fire chief you experience some wastiness in your career. You guys just asked a lot of good questions, okay? So the big thing is how do you get all that information in one pot and start by dissecting what you need? We didn't have anything but the back of the Tahoe, like the gentleman just said, Bob just said, okay? That Tahoe has served us all very well. However, we can't watch Oprah. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. we needed real-time data, and we needed information, and we didn't collect all that. Not every one of us carry a Wi-Fi hotspot with us and stuff like that. So I went to the county fire chiefs, and we had what they call the SOSIG group, and we received funding for almost $600,000 or $700,000, and we got ourselves an incident command vehicle. It serves everything. Over the years, it's been upgraded electronically for data retrieval, also for receiving satellite, and also for receiving telecom. And it's available to anybody in this room that has taken possession of it to maintain it and also operate it. Right now, it's sitting down in the city of Cincinnati. They're operating it for Oktoberfest. Police are involved in that. FBI's in there. Secret Service is in there. Just goes to the various agencies that need to be involved. Now they communicate to that, the little conference room in there, but we have satellite data links, and we also have internet, and we also have phone, and we also have monitoring system for the local networks. Sometimes the news gives you more information faster than we can get it in the field. And then somebody will say, well, didn't you just see it on the Channel 5? Well, no, we didn't see it. Now we can see it. The whole purpose of that is so that the incident commander and the command staff and unified command can all come together and start strategizing where we're going next. And one of the big things is that by doing it that way, that allows for those individuals to communicate with people in their own discipline now, as I call it, and be able to start bringing those resources needed, how they can coordinate those, and make that incident go real smooth. Okay? Every one of us in this room, you at the College of Medicine, how many areas in the College of Medicine have hazardous materials? How many cadavers are down there in there? Think about this. I mean, we laugh about it in a sense, but they're preserved, right? And there's an exposure there, okay? The other part of this equation, though, is the hazardous materials unit. Right now, Greater Cincinnati Hazmat takes care of 7 counties, and we do Fairfield. We got 3 counties in Indiana, and we respond pretty much in a big geographical area. The gentleman right over here, I'm introduced you to Dennis. Him and I are one of the duty officers. So the first phone call comes for dispatch to us, and then we disseminate where we go from there, along with our members. But the Command 400 is operated by civilians. It's also operated by fire personnel and police personnel. So the big thing is we're all working together. And quite frankly, 9/11 helped do this. It brought a lot of us together. And the reason why they did that is because we finally realized we need to talk to each other. Okay? And I'll tell you a good example. That's you guys. Good luck, guys. Be safe. Remember, we all go home. The big thing is, more than anything, is that when you talk about a mass casualty unit, a mass casualty incident, Command 400 is a good tool for that because they'd be in contact with the Board of Health, also with the Health Collaborative, and also directly to the hospital. It's a communication event as well. And in case Hamilton County concept, summarize real quickly, we'll have to go down. We have the ability to dispatch that.
Yeah, gotcha. Wonderful. Trent, DJ, hang up if you would. And let's, members of our team, come on up. Dan, he's already mentioned you. What do you do for a living? And why are you a member of the team?
I'm one of the original members of the team from back in 1980. I have retired, but that doesn't, I'm family miserably at it. I'm also a duty officer, so I respond on that first call and get all that information and deal with a lot of stuff. I pretty much do the operations side of Greater Cincinnati Hazmat. I let Chief Jetter, he gets to go and talk to the chief, and he does all that fancy stuff, and he goes around and, shakes hands and whatever, while I'm out there doing all those things and assigning people to do the stuff that they need to do to get this job done. The other part of that is that I have a lot of different part-time jobs now. I also work for the city of Lebanon as a fire safety inspector training officer. I am a safety officer for Ohio Task Force 1, which is our urban search and rescue team on the FEMA side. We can deploy anywhere in the country.
Yeah, you just came back from the New Orleans area, right?
We just back from Louisiana, and earlier this summer we also went to Surfside, Florida for a building collapse. So we have to deal with, as safety officer on that side of that, I deal with a lot of things, especially on, for the College of Medicine people. We were dealing with air monitoring and things at Surfside because one of the doctors on the site was also at 9/11. He was really concerned about the dust and dust particles. I also have to worry about work rest cycles. We do medical monitoring on a regular basis. For the hazmat side, I'm also trying to do things I'm trying to get with Dr. McMullen and just having a small antidote kit. If we have a mass casualty, you ain't got enough antidotes in DC. It's just that simple. Even with the chem pack, I mean, if it's that big of a thing, we can get some of the chem packs out, but by the time we're there out in the field, we've either got dead bodies or we've got people that are going to be affected by it. It's pretty simple with that part of it. The medical monitoring that we do on this team is basically what we end up doing is we have an annual physical, and then we do on-site medical monitoring, and we're going to record any and all exposures and have them deal with that. Like I said, if something comes down the pipe where there is an issue with that personnel with either cancers or any other type of thing, we're going to end up sending them to occupational health also. It's those types of things. Our medical monitoring is not like, oh, we had a run and we're going to start sticking pins and needles and everything and everybody, getting all that stuff. But it is something that we are doing. After 40 years of experience with this, I probably have been in most of the chemicals that you saw up here today. So, yeah, I'm still walking, so I don't know how that happened.
All right.
So, but we have a lot of good members. They've been out and they have a lot of good experience.
Come on up and
Real
introduce
quick,
yourself.
real quick, we have a research team. I'm gonna introduce you a couple guys. This is Matt Brennan, I know this dude for a long time. The big thing is we got bodies in the field. These are just two members. We have doctors, scientific doctors from the U.S. Department of Health that are part of our team as well. So we bring research people with us. So,
Yeah, and Matt, tell us a little about your day job and why you're involved with our team.
I don't have a day job.
There you go.
I did 35 and a half years service as firefighter for a medical college now. I've been with the head of that team for 19 years. And one thing is you students, you don't use it, you will use it. So whatever you're learning in school, whatever you pick up your internships or go off or whatever, practice. Really good. I've been 19 years with this team, and I'm still learning how to make things work and to do the research. I started out as a technician, and then transitioned over to the research team. Couldn't keep always be on that damn lead.
Yeah. Yeah, good morning, my name is Ron Cantiello. You're also going to see train as far as I am also retired. I'm retired from the United States Army. Was in position of what we call the Northcom Commercial Civilian Slave Owners. I was a team chief for State of Ohio that brought in federal forces on any type of mass disaster, whether it was a natural disaster or a terrorist attack. I've been a member of PC Hazmat since January 1994. WMD, Hazmat Tech, Incident Command, and like Matt, got a little too old now, so now I am on the research team, but I also continue to do professional development, multiple times a year. And as Matt pointed out, we have to stay current on what we do in this field. We're all part of a larger team, okay? We're part of the initial responders, but we're not going to be successful unless we have people of your quality and capability coming after a certain phase that we do to make sure the rest of the public are protected and safe. So,
That's for sure.
Yeah. The hazmat team, I've been in with long, Bennett, 1989, 90 is when it all started. And as we get older, you gotta look at the new generation coming in these places. And I'm gonna introduce you to one of our new generations.
Yeah, so you put on that message and
thank you.
Called out.
You share your name and what your day job is and why you joined our team on wheelchair.
My name is Emily, I'm primarily firefighter by my 5 years, 5 my day job right now is with Warren County, doing housing issues and community declarations and EFPs and national plans and specific. So I'm also on the high task force now, who is federal agency on the planning team and information. So I was with Bennett last summer, I did a big in Louisiana, this work, but I'm really involved in the team between county and EAC, they were that good and the task force and also commercial.
My name's Tom Wagner, I'm Deputy Fire Chief for the City of Fairfield Fire Department. Been on the team since the early nineties. I got my start in HAZMAT, back when I worked at a place, most of you probably haven't heard about, they're called Fernald. Former Department of Energy site, so we dealt with a lot of chemical issues, radiological issues, or whatever, that's where my interest kind of peaked in it. And I helped senior bosses because of HAZMAT, and kind of get invited to joining teams or whatever, so I've been on the team since the nineties. But to kind of chime in on what Chief Kelly and Chief Hannafin all mentioned, part of my job as deputy chief is to interact with a lot of the chemical companies that exist in Fairfield and build those relationships, and also it's another way that the two teams kind of interact together and, to build those relationships and kind of know the people before we get them together.
Thank you. Rick? This is what we call the gas man. Yes. And we're not talking about the pipe that we release, okay? He's our expert.
Good morning. My name is Rick Yan. I've been on the team for 27 years, spent 30 years in the fire service. When I entered the fire service, most of these weren't even on the shirt because it was 1974. I became one of the earliest paramedics, entering paramedic school in 77. We graduated in 78. So,
And you're still upright.
and I'm still upright. My specialty, I work for Lindy Corporation, one of the largest gas company in the world. I am the team leader for this area for our emergency response. I'm a senior field service tech in the field. So there are 15 of us members in the state of Ohio. We have two teams, one in Toledo, one in North Burlington, and then the Cincinnati Wilmington area. And we're 4-foot teams from level A all the way down to all of our air monitoring systems. We have 30 teams throughout the United States, and we can be deployed to any of those areas needed. And that's just the United States. We have teams in Canada, teams in Mexico. So pretty much if it deals with gas that we're making a response on, or containers of some type, I deal with it, tell them what kind of containers and everything else, and how we're going to deal with the containers as far as that part.
And it's an honor to have you on our team. As you know, we turn to you for your expertise, because it's your day job, you know?
That's my day job.
So
Yeah.
it's amazing. Thank you so much. Have a round of applause for members of the team. You may or may not know that there's been a person carrying a gun throughout our seminar. Maybe multiple people carrying a gun, but this gun carrier happens to be an FBI agent. So I'm just going to ask the agent to raise his hand so that when we break, if any of you would like to learn about becoming an FBI agent or how they interact with students and with professors going overseas, and for our LEPC meetings, he's there, has a real presence in our community. All right. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. My wife brought donuts and other stuff that's in here, and then we're going to gather at our trailer in the back. All right. How about a round of applause for all our presenters? All right. Thank you all.
Yes.
Thank you. I hope this part is good. Oh, yeah. And I will send to you the link, the video, once we get it all posted up.